Okay, it is 1 o'clock on Wednesday, March 13th. CCWD board meeting. Would you all rise and join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Rebecca, would you be kind enough to call the roll, please?
Director Underhill?
Here.
Director Redeman?
Here.
Director Cicada?
Here.
President Thomas?
I am here.
And Director Davidson is absent.
He'll be calling in, I'm sure. Okay, at this time, we take under consideration public comments. Any member of the public may address the board on any subject that is not on the agenda for today. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration, and no action can be taken on anything not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. So do we have anybody from the public that would like to address the board? Okay. Seeing none, next on the agenda are the consent items. They're expected to be routine and non-controversial. Items will be placed or acted upon by the board at one time without discussion, and any board member may request that any item be removed for later discussion. I would like to pull for, you'll understand why in a moment, but 3A.
I'd like to also pull 3B.
Move for acceptance of 3C.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 3C. Would you poll the board?
Director Underhill?
Yes.
Director Redeman?
Yes.
Director Cicada?
Yes.
President Thomas?
Yes. Okay, on the item 3A, if you look at my report, and it pains me to have to tell you this, but I made a mistake.
In your favor or the board?
Well, you'll see how it's going to turn. It'll be a wash, actually, but we have this ruling that we cannot bill for 2 meetings in the same day, and if you look at the 213, the groundwater meeting in Stockton that I attended and the board meeting that I attended the same day, and I stuck my finger in the cash drawer for $120. However, if you look at the signing of the Umpqua resolution, where I personally guaranteed the $5.6 million loan that we got from Umpqua, I didn't vote for signing that day or driving up and signing that day. So I would, with your approval, I would like to remove the 120 for going to Stockton and substitute for going to San Andreas instead. Does that sound like a reasonable trade-off? Okay, we can vote for approval on that particular item if somebody wants to recommend that.
Move for acceptance of the 3A with the change that Russ just recommended.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please poll the board on that one.
Director Underhill?
Yes.
Director Redeman?
Yes.
Director Cicada?
Yes.
President Thomas?
I will vote to approve that as well. So, okay, and we have another item 3B.
Is Jeff here that can answer? There he is, hiding from me.
Because I know you're going to ask questions.
I'll try and make it quick. I'll save some for the finance meeting. On the first page for the health insurance for retirees, is that a monthly fee, quarterly? And then the second question to that is, how many retirees do we have?
Which one are you talking
On page, on the claim summary, on the AP checks? Yeah, page 1, Anthem Blue Cross down towards the bottom, 45,000 some odd.
We make, yes, that is the monthly payment we make to Anthem Blue Cross for existing retirees. And you will also see individual payments on existing retirees that we refund them money for their payments they make to PERS. So you're gonna, this is what we call the cost for existing retirees. And I don't have the exact number, but I think it's north of 60.
More than 60 retirees? Wow.
Yes.
Does the policy for health insurance stop when a retiree reaches Medicare age?
What happens is when PERS is involved, we get a credit from Medicare, I'm sorry. And so it actually reduces our costs when they reach Medicare age. And that will come in as a separate charge, a separate credit.
Okay. And let's see, I got that one answered. On page 4 of the disbursements, I'm looking from Gov Connection, the Surface Pros, the laptops.
Yes.
I guess they were approved prior to me being here. And so I just wanted to, when I see things like that, I'm always looking for, not spending very much money, I guess you could say. And so I'm just kind of wondering why we had to do those, and I understand that's gonna be part of a GIS process or something, so.
It's part of GIS, but it's also part of the work order process. What we now have is we've transitioned from the guys in the field carrying paper maps.
Okay.
And now we have some of the maps on, and you'll see a presentation today about that. So we have paper maps and basically PDF.
Are these like laptops, or are they more
They're
like
not.
iPad type thing?
They're
Oh,
the-
those, nice.
And what they allow is, we started rolling out first in the collections crew because Daryl had put together a process software so they can do mapping and work orders and so forth. And they proved very, very beneficial. And what's also happening is the workers in the field are embracing technology, so as we roll out GIS and we roll out all these other features, they don't have to go back to the warehouse and get fax work orders. They don't have to carry around paper maps. They have all this information at their fingertips.
Okay,
And it's embracing technology, and it's actually making us more efficient.
okay. On the same page, going down to Scott, I'll mess it up, Grutzmeister?
Grutzmacher.
Macher. Anyhow, he has winter weather gear reimbursement. How often do we reimburse staff for that?
2 years on,
Every
every
2
2 years
years.
on winter gear.
And then still on that same page, going down to Holt of California, we have the mini excavator and the skid steer model.
Yes.
I'm sure they were approved at some point prior to me being here.
Actually, that was the meeting you missed
Uh-oh.
when we did the meeting.
See what
Okay.
happens? See what
Yeah.
happens,
And
Cindy?
so with that being said, were those replacing older equipment?
No, actually, they're new pieces of equipment. We just, during the mid-year review, when David came on board, he assessed the equipment needs in certain areas. And what we have found over the years, the district is moving away from backhoes, larger pieces of equipment, to mini excavators, so they can get into certain properties and work areas that the backhoes could not reach. And so what we did is we repurposed some of the approved capital outlay budget for 18-19 and repurposed it in these two particular purchases.
Were
And
we,
made the board aware of it at that time. It didn't require a budget adjustment. We just said instead of this piece of equipment, we're gonna buy these two pieces of equipment.
and were there any old equipment that you plan on selling to recoup any of this cost?
Not on these two pieces of equipment, because we just started purchasing mini excavators within the last, I believe, 5 years.
And then down just below there, Jamesville Office Furniture. Where's
Yes.
the office furniture for? Where's that at? OP?
In this building, when you see Op HQ,
Mhm.
that's this building.
Okay. And what was this office furniture?
There's furniture, and then we're also, as in response to recommendations by Occam JPIA and Risk and Ergonomics, we're installing some of the rising desks, the elevating desks. So what we're buying is the mechanism that lifts the desk up and down and using the existing desk. And that way the employees can sit for a while and then stand as well. And ergonomically, this has proved to be beneficial to employees' health and
For this cost, how many employees are gonna benefit from that?
I think we have
How many deaths did you redo?
employees. We still have maybe 4 deaths to go.
Okay, but you had 20, you said that you did out of that?
I think
Okay.
there's about 20 employees in this office.
Okay.
I don't,
And on the page 5, I'm looking at the NEO funds and New York Life. So I have Life, you know, the AD&D and LTD, and then below that is life insurance. What's the difference between those? They both, one says January, February, and the other one is for January. So what are those? Why are there
Well,
difference?
okay. If you look at the New York Life, we'll start with that one,
Mhm.
and slide over to just to the right of that $1,149. There's the C next to that.
Oh, got it. I just missed that.
Okay. And the other one's Mutual of Omaha, that's our premiums for life, disability, and long, that we provide
Right.
to the employees.
Well, if I would've looked at that C, I could have answered that question. And so I got those. On page 6 of 7, down at the tire rack, we bought 4 tires for vehicle 706. And, you know, I see a lot of tires being purchased, you know, with winter tires, regular tires, so I'm just making a comment that I'm sure somebody's tracking these, how often they get replaced, and when the winter tires go off, where they're housed, that kind of thing, I
Yes,
would
we do.
imagine.
Patty keeps a log of all the repairs and equipment that we purchased. One of the advantages of the new maintenance shop is the storage of tires, especially when we go from winter to summer. We'll be able to store them and tag them and know which people to go to.
And I imagine, like, if we were to pull up 706's file, I could see all the tire changes and any kind of repairs, kind of a
So
system
probably
like
the
that.
last 2.5 years.
And I asked that, I asked that. And the only other thing on the last page, I'm looking at fuel, and that's gotta be district-wide, I would imagine.
Are you about WEX?
Yes.
Yes, that, we provide WEX credit cards, fuel cards to the employees, and that is district-wide.
What would you say the average monthly cost is on fuel for this, do you know, offhand?
I'd have to look into that, but you're probably varying based on vehicles, probably in that $11,000-12,000 range, 10 to 12.
Okay, those were my questions.
Okay, could I just make one comment,
Mhm.
please?
Yes,
Okay, there was reference to GIS, you know, buying the computers or the laptops that the fellas can take around.
Yes,
GIS is going to really, really save us, because in my mind, I'm seeing a picture of a few months ago, or a year ago, one of our field forces bent over maps on the hood of his car because he was looking for a location, you know, to do a leak repair, for example. And that is what's going to be saving us. You know, taking away the physical work, he's going to be able to look at his little device through GIS and be able to isolate that. So it was just, I mean, that's wonderful.
Yeah, no, I agree with that technology. I think it's really needed out there.
and I'm not gonna, I don't really want to steal Charles' thunder because he's gonna be presenting today.
He's
on
not
GIS.
here yet. Oh, yes, he is.
There are so many advantages to GIS, and one of the things that are the multitude of layers of information that when you pinpoint on a particular asset, you can drill down and see. It's gonna take time to get there, Charles will go through that. But one of the true advantages is things can be updated instantaneously, whereas maps take a long time. Yes, we are investing in GIS as we move forward.
Yes,
are you finished?
I'm finished.
Okay.
I'm finished.
Well, while we still have this open, I'd just like to ask a question for clarification. On page 6, no, that's wrong. I'm talking about page 2 of 7. Down near the bottom, there's these $4,367 worth of Class 2 road base, and it says it has gone to La Cantina. the wastewater treatment down there, some treatment plant?
That's for store, what they do is they basically have deliveries there, and when they need to use it on jobs, they'll load it up from that and then transfer it over to the job.
Is it normal to have about 14 truckloads of stuff per month? I mean, that's 280 yards of material.
That, I'm gonna defer to Damon on that, and he can talk about it now, or he can talk about it in his ops review.
Okay.
Happy to talk about it now.
Sure.
So that would be, for the month, that would be a stockpile of base rock for all of the service line repairs. Lockington wastewater is near the Lockington distribution system shop where the base rock would be stored. And so then, field staff and the distribution crew and collections crew and other departments if need be can grab road base from that stockpile and use it in the Rancho Calaveras stimulated area.
Okay, so we have a front loader or tractor or something down there to load it onto a dump truck and take it to the individual job sites? Okay, all right. But is that a usual amount of consumption for a month? I mean, that seems like a lot.
So the objective is to use that for a period of months, not just for the month.
Okay, very good. All right. And then on page 6, almost near the top here, you have a Scott Ratterman travel charge of $10.44. That seems like you should move farther away from that.
We should really look to the bottom of the page, see Russ Thomas, $284 compared to my $10.
Can we average that up?
We should ask Russ to move a little closer to the
What would it be like if we couldn't have a little fun here? So, yeah.
He'd be listening to me all the time.
Okay, anybody have any questions about anything we talked about? If not, would you poll the board on this item, please?
We gotta make a motion to,
Well, no, we don't need a motion.
Second?
Consent agenda 3B.
Okay, and a motion and a second? Now you can poll the board.
Director Engel?
Yes.
Director Letterman?
yes.
Dr. Cicada?
Yes.
President Thomas?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now we have, I think this is going to be a pretty interesting report. We have a presentation, this is, by the way, it's item 4A, presentation by Green Gen Storage on the McCollum water battery project. I was visualizing this small little battery, but it's much larger than that, apparently. Good afternoon.
Fairly sizable battery.
Yeah.
Won't fit your cell phone. So while this presentation is, if I turn this on, I'll be on. While this is getting set up, I just wanted to introduce myself, Aram Shumavan with Green Gen. I've got some of my teammates over here, Jen, Mike, and Scott. Jen is project managing and managing environmental permitting, and Scott and Mike are on the engineering side.
If you could repeat your name, please, I'd like to write it down.
Yes, it's Aram, A-R-A-M,
Okay.
Shumavan, S-H-U-M-A-V-O-N.
All right, welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity. And also, I have to say, I'm glad at the amount of levity that I'm seeing here. This is very, very exciting. We have a tendency to be a little lighthearted as well, but I'm going to try to stay focused on the details here. So thank you for the opportunity. Excuse me. I just wanted to start by framing really in general and understanding what it is that we're doing at Green Gen. So you're aware at the highest level, we focus on renewables development, especially around storage, energy storage in particular. There's a separate component to storage that is water storage, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We have 50+ years of experience, as you can tell by at least my gray hair. Some of that, it's fairly evenly distributed, I guess, but and a great group of team members that include individuals here and those that are not present that sort of have pulled together a broad spectrum of subject matter expertise, including Power Tech engineers, McMillan Jacobs, Kearns and West, and Seven Skyline. Very, very happy with the diversity of the team and the skill sets and depth of experience across the entirety of the team. Really emphasizing what it is that we do is look at, excuse me, storage. Unlike what most people think of for energy storage, which these days are batteries, like lithium-ion batteries that might be in a cell phone or alike, or in an electric vehicle, as the case may be. We're actually using water and the potential for that water to move downhill as a form of energy storage. So conveniently, that provides a much more preferential environmental profile to things like having to manage lithium mines and things along those lines to make lithium-ion batteries work. We are in particular focused on this project because it gives us an opportunity to really address what is now a legislative mandate, which is 100% renewables by 2045 as a result of SB 100. So, excuse me. In terms of why this project, as you may be familiar, SB 100 has a 100% carbon-free requirement by 2045. California is following the lead of a small collection of islands about 2,500 miles from here called Hawaii that set a 2045 100% goal. Still trying to figure out how to get field trips there for everyone, but so we can see how they're doing it. But importantly, when we start talking about carbon-free, it's really important to realize as we pull some of these, what we refer to as combustion-based resources, things that burn fuel to make electricity, that we are going to increasingly need storage to be able to meet our electric reliability goals. And hydropower, pumped storage, is a crucial part of that. It really is the easiest mechanism and most cost-effective mechanism to move large amounts of storage onto the grid. So just a high-level overview for how pumped storage works. This basic concept is a laser pointer here. I'm so used to doing that, but essentially taking advantage of the ability to move when demand for electricity is low. Okay. When demand for electricity is low, the pump facility right here pumps water into an upper reservoir and waits until demand for electricity is high. These usually are corresponding with prices. So when prices are low, you move water uphill, and then as prices increase, you allow that water to move downhill, producing electricity that allows you to economically store energy more cost effectively than trying to produce it from other sources. So the same water moves from lower elevations to higher elevations and then back down again. The specifics of this project are very much focused on, at this early stage, trying to fully determine the optimal size of the project. So we have the potential to go from as little as 400 megawatts on the existing facility up to 1,200 megawatts in size. And the time period that we expect for the permitting is essentially over the next approximately 4 or 5 years, with some construction that follows beyond that. If we look in particular at what we were talking about, I'm going to go back to my little mouse if I can figure out where it is. The project, as we'll discuss, can involve either Lower Bear Reservoir or Upper Bear Reservoir and a round trip down hill to the Salt Springs facility. And we'll get into a little bit about the options for either Lower or Upper Bear Reservoir specifically, and I might ask Mike or some of our other team members to speak to the specifics on that. But what that allows us to do then is round trip between these locations, consistent with the pricing that suggests that it is cost effective to move the water up the hill, and then cost effective to then let it go down. These are existing facilities, so it's important to understand what we're talking about here are existing reservoirs, and being able to move the water between those existing facilities for purposes of integrating renewables is the primary purpose of this goal, not building new facilities, but taking advantage of these existing facilities to build a penstock and allow for those resources to be leveraged for purposes of integrating renewables, essentially storing solar power or wind power for the time periods where the demand is high and those resources aren't available. So I'm happy to talk about any questions that you may have. I also want to emphasize part of this is a discovery process for us, and this presentation in particular is a chance for us to learn from you in terms of concerns or questions you may have. We believe that in addition to energy storage, water storage is something that is obviously of interest and significantly valuable, and we would like to understand a little bit more about your thoughts around that when we think about potential benefits.
What's going to drive the decision between Lower Bear and Upper Bear?
So there are a number of factors involved, and it might be a good idea for Mike to come up and speak to this, but I'm an economist, so watch out, because we have a tendency to oversimplify things, but the difference in the potential height of the reservoir in terms of how much a dam increase, if one is deemed to be efficient, would be will vary based on upper versus lower. Lower, a much larger reservoir, less height increase because it's just a larger surface area, has more volume. When you move into the upper reservoir, it's a much smaller overall volume, and so the potential for raising that dam higher becomes an issue. Mike, do you want to speak to the specifics on that? Okay.
I thought it might
Every
be
once
the-
in a while you
the
get lucky.
drop, or the difference in elevation between Salt Springs and one or the other. That's not a driving factor at all?
They're not very much different in difference in height.
And then the next question, when you get to it, is what is the recommended or estimated height increase of either dam?
Sure. So Mike Manring, that's a good question. I think because of the size of Lower Bear, what we would look for to help determine the project size is the acre-foot of water need, and it would be the same out of both. But the dam raise accordingly at Upper Bear would be much more, would be larger to get that same acre-foot of water than it would be at Lower Bear. So the decision is an economic decision. It's an environmental decision, absolutely. It's a recreational decision. Bigger impacts on Lower Bear because of the development and the recreational use there than there is on Upper Bear. But the size of a dam raise at Lower Bear is much smaller. We're on the order of 2 to 4 feet, where that same acre-foot of water that a 2 to 4 foot raise at Lower Bear, we're talking a 7 to 10 foot raise at Upper Bear. So we want to be mindful of the impacts on shoreline, recreationalists, environmental impacts because of much more development to get that same acre-foot of water.
I- Oh, go ahead.
You had a specific question about is the difference in head impact?
Not really, no.
Okay.
Because there's a longer tunnel length from Upper Bear to Salt Springs than there is from Lower Bear, so the head difference isn't very large.
Bertha?
I'm curious to how you came to decide Lower Bear, Upper Bear, and Salt Springs. I mean, there's water storage all over the state, and I'm happy you came to the Sierras, but it's ROI, and so you're telling me that it's going to be, you have investors who are going to be making money off of this, and I just wanted to know why you came here.
So it's a great question, and I've spent probably the last 15 years of my life looking at pump storage projects. What is unique is the close proximity of two very large reservoirs. We don't have that very often where we could do an
Oh, okay.
underground tunnel connection between two very large reservoirs without significant adverse impacts. You know, we're not proposing any dam raise at Salt Springs. There's enough restrictions around that from the wilderness area, the existing project that's there. So this project would not have any flow impacts downstream of Salt Spring Dam. So to have an existing upper reservoir potential already there is pretty unique. When I look at projects around the country and really around North America, we often have to go and build a new upper reservoir to match that. This already sits there. So it's a very unique project where our footprint is an underground tunnel and an underground powerhouse. So it's pretty unique that would be the major footprint. There'd be some new transmission that would go with this along the existing line. But the uniqueness is something that we definitely noticed.
Mike, you said that you'd traveled around and looking at these different projects around the country. The one that pops into my mind is San Luis Reservoir. It's been, the same technology has been used down there for probably 40 years. You know what I'm talking about? So
Yes, as part of the California State Water Project. It isn't a pump storage project, but it's got the reservoir storage on it, and there's generation, I believe, when it comes down.
No, they have, that's the O'Neill Forebay is where they store the water, and then at night they pump, or in the daytime when
Yes, you're right.
they
Cal
pump,
DWR, yes.
they pump it back and forth with just a generator that also acts as a pump when you turn the power on.
So in California, there is, PG&E has the Helms project, which is a pump storage project. Cal DWR has O'Neill, Orville. The Hyatt Powerhouse is technically a pump storage project. They don't use it as much anymore. There's a large one for LA Department of Water Resources. Department of Water and Power has the Castaic project. Then there was a new one built in 2012 by the San Diego County Water Authority, a smaller one. So there are a number of them in California right now.
The scale of this topo map is so small that I can't really tell what the lines indicate, whether those are 100-foot increments or 20-foot increments. Can you tell me what the height differential is between the?
I'll jump ahead to some of these. This is a question that came up. So these are 50-foot increments, I believe, on these topo. It's in your packet. They're called out because, yes, topo is helpful, but it's also very hard to see. It was a balance between the information and then the visual side of it.
So, but as far as the elevation above sea level for Salt Spring versus same thing on, say, Lower Bear, is that?
So is your question on the head difference, the elevation difference?
Right.
So I'll go to this one. The Lower Bear is 5822 elevation. Salt Springs is 3959. And then Upper Bear is 5876. So it's roughly 50, 55 feet head difference between Upper Bear and Lower Bear. And then we're up at nearly 2,000 feet difference between the Upper Bear, Lower Bear, and then Salt Springs. Pretty good head difference between those two.
That's a lot of PSI pressure in the bottom of that canal, or the tunnel.
It would be fairly large machines, yes.
Wow. Okay.
What's the length or in yards or miles of the new transmission lines that you're proposing that would be necessary?
So at most of the size we're looking at, it's about a 17-mile run down to the Tiger Creek substation. I think there's an existing 115 kV line. This may have to get upgraded to a 230 kV line, but coming out of Tiger Creek, I believe there's two 230 kV lines. So it would be about a 17-mile reconductoring of the existing transmission lines.
Of existing
Yeah.
transmission right away, because there's a PG&E facility at Salt Springs.
So it would follow the same
Yeah.
path, okay.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the studies we have to look at is the transmission impact. Obviously, in the climate we are with transmission lines, we are very concerned about what transmission line size would be required, the location, the permitting. It's definitely one of our early engineering analysis.
Okay, I'm so against this ruling that is trying to take away the ability to claim, hydrogeneration as a renewable energy source. So I don't bother myself by trying to remember that threshold. But you said that this one could be scaled from 400 megawatts to 1,200. What is that? 1,200 is still below the threshold that would throw you out?
So the initial ruling, I believe, was a 50 megawatt limit for energy storage, which was essentially a battery storage technology procurement requirement. So this is well above that. But there is energy storage policy that sits in front of the California legislature right now that actually would be anything over 500. I don't have the specifics on that, but I know it's a new bill that they're interested, that this would qualify.
So I'm trying to get my head around how that would affect your decision-making if the maximum output that could be considered renewable is 500.
No, I think, so just to
It's
clarify,
a small- it's a hybrid.
President Thomas, I think what you're referring to is the maximum size of a hydro project that can earn renewable energy credits, which is 30 megawatts.
30.
The 50 megawatt cap on pumped hydro is something different.
Yeah, apologies, I was answering a different question.
Okay. So there is no impediment for you here. You could scale it to 1,200 and not
Yes, so
shoot
this
yourself
would
in the
not
foot.
qualify in the state's requirement of what is considered renewable hydro, but when we no longer have gas or coal or emission generation, I don't think that's necessarily going to be our concern. It's going to be more on what energy storage is. So there's not an energy storage policy related to what's renewable or what isn't.
Okay.
A couple of things. Water, are you drought resistant?
So there are a number of different, there are many different ways to approach this from a supply perspective. So one of the things that's important to understand is that we're really talking about moving the water up and down. And so in many regards, there's a finite amount of water that needs to be used, period. So traditional hydro, the water runs down and then it is gone in the sense that it is run down. And in this situation, you can actually cycle that right back up. I think that also raises the question then of, there's also the potential for increasing the size of a dam specifically to increase the amount of water that is stored, and that's part of the reason why we're here to talk, is there is an opportunity then to be able to actually combine both the pump storage facility and broader water storage. And so that's something that we're open to considering and interested in considering as we think about the right ways to build the total value stack that makes this project as desirable as possible.
It's not a consumptive project.
But do you have data on what additional potential expansion is available at each of those reservoirs and what the additional cost would be to create storage beyond what your project needs?
So we don't yet. That's part of our analysis, is what would the dam raises needed to be to bring about the acre foot of water we need for our project. But then we would want to talk to the county about what storage needs may the county need as we move forward, looking at it in the future. So this would be what is our project need. That may be adequate, but when we've talked to some folks, they would want larger dam raises than what we were even considering needed. And we want to balance that between the environmental impact and then the development needs from the county.
One of the things that I also liked reading was the fact that you wouldn't come in and, tear everything up and for the sake of your project. I'm curious as to why you have so many Indian tribes that may be affected.
So I think Jen actually might be best positioned to be able to.
We have a different person for that question.
Oh, okay.
I'm helping a stakeholder engagement. Hi, I'm Jen Ruda. We went ahead and met with the NIHC in Sacramento and requested a formal list of tribes that we should provide outreach to for this project. And they gave us a number of tribes. We also met with the California Energy Commission's tribal liaison, and he recommended a few more. All of them are within 100 miles of the project location. So we have just completed a letter out to all of those tribes. There's 12 different ones that we have identified, just letting them know the project is there to see if they have interest and any questions about the project. And we'll find out if any of those tribes are interested in the project.
Impacted.
Yeah, if they're interested. I mean, I can imagine, I don't know for sure, but these tribes may have cultural ties to the area historically. The dam raises, could be of interest to the tribes because there's a possibility that cultural finds could be inundated with the dam raise. And that would be the main reason I would think there could be interest, but there could be just interest in general because it's the region that they, culturally have ties to. If you'd like that list of the tribes, I'd be more than happy to provide that.
I think it might be in the packet here. I think it might be in the packet,
Yeah.
at least the tribes that
Oh,
you're
yeah.
doing
Yeah,
outreach to. My last question is, do you have any data on expectations for how much water, volume of water you're moving downhill compared to what you expect to move back uphill? Just a comparison.
Same amount.
Yeah, I think this is another one that probably Mike would be helpful. It should be the same in all situations, but I don't want to state that unequivocally. Like this is the beginning of the study process, but in theory that should always equal out. And
Tell
that
me
we would,
if I'm wrong, when you're moving it downhill, you're making money. When you're moving it uphill, you're spending a little bit of that money.
ideally
it
as
would still
small as
be equal?
possible. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. So the act of moving it uphill takes advantage of those same transmission lines to move the water right back up. The reason why we move it up is so that there is an opportunity to let it come back down again. And the advantage of that lower reservoir is it essentially acts as the basin to hold that water long enough for us to get it back up.
It's easier to come up here.
That's
It's exactly right. It's ideally the same water. So it's a tunnel that connects the two that generates as the water comes down. Then it uses that same tunnel to spear on and come up. So it's essentially charging the battery. The idea is we use the energy that comes down through the turbines, it generates the electricity out the transmission line. When power prices are low, then we turn the turbines around and they spin the water back uphill to recharge the battery, which is essentially why we use the term water battery.
Well, I lied. It wasn't my last question. The follow-up question is relating to those two, is there a requirement that you have to, in putting your project together, there's a promise or a contractual obligation to do exactly that, to whatever you bring down, you move back up?
That would be in our engineering design and our license that we would get ultimately from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. That we would have a pretty strict operation regime, that we cannot continue to use water that isn't in our purview. We can't just continue to generate.
Whereabouts are you in this process right now?
That's the third one.
So
Levity from starting over? No,
so there is a preliminary permit that is filed at FERC, the Federal
Right.
Energy Regulatory
Got
Commission.
that.
And that begins the process of a clock that counts for us to move forward. The stakeholder and outreach efforts and conversations like these are to help make sure that we have fully surveyed the potential concerns and costs and benefits from as broad a set of stakeholders as possible. Those then fold into the permitting processes, both from an environmental standpoint and from an energy standpoint. And so, as you are likely aware, there are some constraints on downstream flow. There's an agreement, multi-party stakeholder agreement that covers flow below Salt Springs. And our intent is to not harm in any way that agreement. That's part of the existing FERC application, was to say we recognize that there's this agreement and we're not trying to impact that in any way. But the full scope of what will be considered is part of a series of conversations, including ones like this, and we hope successive conversations with your organization to be able to figure out what the ideal path forward is. We will consider a broad spectrum of other issues to make sure that we're doing the due diligence on studying all of those impacts.
Right. We basically came with the permit of, we'll start with, there'll be no net changes to the existing facility up there, the releases of Salt Springs. So then it's what is the optimum project size between Lower Bear and Salt Springs or Upper Bear and Salt Springs. And that's what we're in the middle of, is the engineering analysis, the permitting, understanding from a stakeholder outreach. You know, at first, our idea was only a raise as to what we needed from a water perspective. And then we've talked to yourselves and others, and the idea came up, well, what if there was a larger dam raise to accommodate more storage? We hadn't really considered that in our initial analysis, so we're taking these and looking at refining the engineering based on input. We've had many stakeholders hear our project and say, we don't want any dam raise. So we're in that process of doing the early due diligence. And I just put this up there because this is our project schedule. There's the existing FERC timeline, our preliminary permit has a 3-year time frame on it. We're about a year and a half into that or so, and then there's multiple off-ramps or multiple milestones from environmental and engineering. This is in your packet here. And then there's the actual construction time frame and the transmission upgrade. So we're in the midst of year 2 on this.
I have a question for you, Michael. Does this project affect the West Point master plan at all? I wasn't here for that meeting when it was adopted, and I hear some of the public was talking about Bear River, and so can this affect that master plan at all?
I don't think so off the top of my head. Peter might be a better person to ask about it.
Yeah, it's a different watershed. There's a lot of Bear Creeks out there.
Okay.
Yeah, this is different Bear Creek, so.
I just heard that. And then can I get a copy of this PowerPoint?
I believe it was circulated already, so, but yes.
Did we get that?
We have enough copies also.
Yeah, yeah,
for the directors, yeah.
absolutely.
Read it better.
As I'm thinking about nearby reservoirs that would also be consistent with this criteria, the Maloney's and Tulloch pops into my head. The only issue that would be is if Tulloch got raised rapidly in the process of the water running down, that might be a concern. But your next project, bring it to Calaveras County. So.
Well, we would definitely be interested in talking more about that. I want to emphasize there is a very large need for storage, and 100% renewables goal 2045. A lot of people think that sounds very far away, but as you could see from this timeline, it takes a while to get these projects in place, and we would happily continue having conversations about other opportunities. The demand for storage to help integrate very high penetration renewables is much larger than this project. We're not going to solve all of the problems with a single project.
What happened to that plan that you were going to put in a nuke plant? So,
Yeah, it kind of fell through.
fell through? Okay. Okay, are there any other questions from the board on this? Michael?
I do have some questions, but I can wait.
Okay. If there are no more questions from the board, I'll give you one shot and then you can come back afterwards. Anybody from the audience like to ask questions or comments on this?
Is there any disappearance loss?
Come to the microphone, please.
Disappearance loss? If you could explain for the economists in the room.
Is there any disappearance loss, like, for instance, evaporation, leakage? Is there a percentage to the amount of fluid flowing through the system?
Didn't sound like an economist.
There's always the potential for evaporation loss. That would be a calculation. We'd look at this reservoir surface area and do a calculation from seasonally. We wouldn't really know the leakage potential until we got into some geotechnical investigations to see if there would be leakage through the tunnels. All tunnels have some minor amount of leakage. So there would always be the chance of an annual small purchase or refill required for this. I would say in the percentage of the overall need, it's fairly small, but it isn't zero.
The one thing that I think might be helpful to be mindful of is the shapes of the reservoirs are they're relatively steep sides, and so you are not radically changing the amount of surface area relative to increasing the potential for evaporation, at least, just because of the steepness there. So it's, you never drain the battery the whole way, right? So there's always going to be surface area where that's going to happen, but the portion associated with the pumped storage component has a relatively small increase in surface area associated with that because of the nature of the basin. Did I do okay as an engineer right there?
Anything that you lose in the tunnel, you could claim as a credit for groundwater recharge.
I like that one. Other questions?
Any other questions from the audience? Michael, you're up.
I only have about 20 or 30 here. This is a huge project, and we're just scratching the surface here. I won't ask them all right now, but I was curious about the regulatory issue. I'm glad you guys kind of addressed that. Is the project viable without the lift of the 50 megawatt cap?
That is no impact on the project.
Okay. And so what can you talk about the plan in terms of how you plan on, I imagine the dollar amount to build this is significant, and so what's the offtake plan, and how does that look going forward?
So we're trying to be as inclusive as possible in that process to make sure that we're not excluding anything. There are some challenges related to some of the larger investor-owned utilities in the state right now, which is complicating a series of these conversations. The good news is that the need for storage is increasing significantly, and as a result of that, the capacity is actually increasing in value, independent of the economics of what I, as an economist, would call the energy arbitrage opportunity. So in terms of specific off-takers, we're not to that stage yet.
Do you guys have existing projects right now? What's your current revenue source?
So GreenGen is a purpose-specific vehicle, but all of us are involved in different projects, both around the country and around the world. So.
Okay. And you're a subsidiary of?
No subsidiary. We're
just
not,
formed
yeah,
for this specific
yes,
project.
Purpose-specific.
Have you gotten into the details of what types of units and how many and the size of each of the generators you'd have there?
Are you talking about from an engineering perspective?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So essentially what we're looking at are, depending on the project side, either 2 or 3 reversible units, 400 megawatts or so. So on the low end, it would be 200 megawatts, and 800 megawatts would be 400, and then a higher size. And this is just for costing, for looking at the water needs and megawatts or megawatt hours and gigawatt hours of storage potential.
Got
so we're in the
Sorry,
really
I
early
must have missed
stages
that
of.
slide. Okay, well, I look forward to seeing how this moves forward.
So we left half a dozen or so copies of the presentation, plus it's on the thumb drive here. So if there's any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out.
You've got 18 more, I believe.
Okay, any other questions? If not, I want to thank you for coming to explain all this to us.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you,
job.
thank you.
Pretty exciting stuff.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 4B on our agenda. This is a presentation discussion of the district's geographic information system. Sandwiches, heirloom sandwiches.
I didn't even try, I went through the packet, see if I could find his, didn't find something out.
Good afternoon. I'm filling in for Sam Singh. He was out for a family issue, so I'm kind of winging it, but I did want to say just that in general, Sam is an engineering technician in the engineering department. He's pretty much taken this on himself, and I've tried at my best managing the engineering department to support his efforts, and I feel like, we're really moving in a positive direction. We've also, have some other staff members, John Gomes and Robbie Creamer, we do have internal meetings and discuss the progress of this, so it's not just Sam on his own doing it. I'm very optimistic about the whole program in general and moving forward with it, And so, what is a geographic information system? So geographic, it's providing that interface where information presented in a geographic format, so it's easy to understand. And that can be linked to a lot of database type information that's kind of hidden behind that graphical interface and much easier to access. And let's see, so the components of GIS, you have the software, the data behind it, the people using it, the hardware that's necessary for that, and then out of that you can do some additional analysis of the data you have. And so how GIS is structured, it can be, you can migrate data into GIS in different layers. So that can be anything from, where are the fire hydrants, or where are water lines, where are sewer lines, where are manholes. Those can all be in separate layers and linked to data. That can include like our water meters and parcels. So we can have water meter data, as far as ownership, and potentially even you could link that to water use on a meter in the future once we implement some additional changes for radio read meters. And so this is multiple layers, and you can go in and you can edit any individual layer and update it, and then issue that layer separately to do your updates, and that can all be done electronically. And that's true too. So if like, for instance, the county, they do an update on their database for parcel ownership, they can ship that over to us. We can import that into our system, and so they coordinate well together. Let's see. What happened here? Oh, must be. Sorry about this. It must be just a graphic that's Sam put in there that's got a lot of. Anyway, this is a little humorous. So he put this in here. So it's like, what's the difference between, so you go try to find Waldo. It's like you got a bunch of, information that's really difficult to locate Waldo. But so that's what we want to avoid. So we want to make it easy for people to find information, and they're not searching around, like on the hood of their cars through maps in the snow and rain, looking for the information they need. And this is just an example of what a GIS map looks like, and that's the kind of the graphical interface that Sam works with. And then on the left there is just the different layers. So you can continue to bring in additional, I don't think there's any limit on the number of layers you can bring in, and other agencies are using GIS too. So, I know you can get data on, from CAL FIRE on, where their fire zones are, and that can be imported to this and overlaid with our service areas, and, so there's some analysis that can be done with that information.
Well, I thought I knew what GIS was until I had a couple engineers started trying to explain it to me. From what I understand, it's taking maps or data with streets on it, for example, and another map with property lines, and another map with fire hydrants, and another map with sewer lines and water meters, and putting them all together.
Right.
And then being able to access that data to see where a break is and what else it's affecting, or to find that. And that's what we're doing here, right? That's
Right,
what-
yeah.
Okay, the GIS.
And so you have.
This is a complicated way of.
Yeah, right, so you have, that's the graphical part of it, and then, it's kind of like these maps are interactive, so, if you wanted to zoom in on a particular fire hydrant, you can click on it, and you can load data into that database about that particular fire hydrant, like how much flow it has, if you're getting into the point where, level where you're doing management of the assets, then you can say, okay, well, when was the last time that was maintained and serviced, and then, so you have.
So do we have access, do our people in the field have access to this right now, or is that's?
No, we don't yet. That's
But
what
we did see on our purchase report that Cindy pointed out some software as well as hardware, the laptops.
I know in the last
Is that
month.
going towards, are those machines in the office here, or are they for our field people?
Those are for our field people.
Okay.
Yeah, so the idea being, so I know these Surface Pros, those were for our field people, so, and they are capable of accepting this kind of database or GIS data on them. So, so anyways, the idea is that, and you can even download them to, distribute them on phones too, these smartphones. It's not quite as user-friendly, obviously. It's a very
Right.
small screen,
So,
but.
and you did say, like, when the county upgrades their information, the data, a new property owner or a new street goes in, or they do something different, or maybe PG&E puts in new power transmission lines somewhere, that data can be, if we have access to that, that data, we can include it into our GIS.
Right.
And just have a smarter, easier access, quicker.
Right, and a lot
more
of
efficient.
agencies are using this technology, so there's a lot of, sharing of information
Okay.
going on, yeah.
Do you have access to the county's GIS system? They have a public one, I wonder if you look at that at all.
Our staff talks with their staff at the county, and I know the original base maps for the county were a joint effort a couple decades ago. But since then, obviously, the county staff has taken that kind of to the next level since then, and so we pretty much are able to access the parcel information from them, and it's true for our own customers too. We have our own customer database for all our water and sewer customers, and that information, the idea is that you can migrate that data over into the database, and it's somewhat semi-automatic. It's the software is set up to accept and receive that information.
And that was one of my questions. In my past life, I used to have a unit where we had, we dealt with a big database for telephone poles, and having all those people, converge on that database, how's that going to work?
I think now it's not going to be necessarily. I think each person. So the people in the field will not have the ability to edit and modify the databases. That'll all be done at the office, and then from the office, it'll be distributed out to the field personnel. So we'll have someone here, probably Sam or another staff person that will kind of be the gatekeeper to maintain the quality of that data and make sure it doesn't.
Because you had under phase one, migrate your AutoCAD system maps to GIS, and then quality assurance, quality control, publish and deploy for staff use. And so that's who's going to take care of phase one.
That is, it's SAM, you know,
It'll
so
be
SAM,
SAM, yeah.
yeah, it's,
Uh-huh.
it's highly technical stuff,
Uh-huh.
and, you know, and I certainly am not, you know,
Uh-huh.
it's not gonna be me, but, yeah, so like I said, Sam has taken this on, and he's done, you know, he's very diligent about, you know, if there's something he doesn't understand, he's willing to dig and research and find the correct answer, and so he can continue to make
Yeah.
progress.
So he'll be doing that, and then he'll be helping, getting some help, I'm sure, because when we come to phase two, we're gonna be creating databases for the assets. That's going to be a real heavy task.
Yeah, so the phase one was to take our CAD drawings and just migrate those over to GIS in kind of a very simple and basic
Uh-huh,
way,
uh-huh.
so that they're at least, and we wanted to do that because we wanted to make them, to replace these paper maps as soon as possible. And, you know, and then the second phase was kind of to go back and think about the quality of that data, and also enhancing that data with you know, better information and better quality information. So that was phase two. And then all through the process, we would be deploying updated versions of this mapping to our field staff.
How many of these phases have you completed?
We have not, we're kind of in what is like a beta test situation right now. So Sam is in the progress of, he's done like the Jenny Lind area, I believe, for this CAD conversion. So, and, you know, and it's highly technical stuff, so, you know, just trying to, before we start sending stuff out to field staff, we kind of somewhat want to test things out, make sure they are user-friendly, that, you know, they can be properly deployed. So there is some, a learning curve that has to go on, and we need to kind of vet and make sure that what we're putting out to the field staff is ultimately going to serve their needs. So Sam is also, you know, he's been working with field staff to try to get them involved as much as possible in terms of utilizing, taking a look at what he's generated and having them kind of go through it and see how it works out for them, just to make sure that the end product is very useful for them.
So go ahead.
So they'll be in phase one for a while.
Well, yeah, because we have such a lot, we're countywide, so yeah, I mean, it's, you know, the idea of phasing it, like I said, was to try to do this CAD conversion. I mean, we asked an outside company to do this, and I think there are outside companies, it's just the problem is that they're gonna do this initial phase, they hand it off to you, and then, you know, you have to have somebody on staff that understands exactly what they did, and, you know, once they hand it off to you, what are you gonna do with all this, what they've generated, you know, and you've gotta weed through, you know, it's not gonna come back polished and perfect, it's, you know, you have to weed through all this data and kind of bring in the databases. They're not gonna migrate all our data into this. They're just gonna basically convert our old maps into GIS, and Sam feels strongly he can do that step.
Absolutely, yeah, because you have, you know, your feet on the ground.
Yeah.
And
And the
I
real
understand that.
time-consuming thing is phase two, when you start to, you know, you have all this, like fire hydrants, you know, the county folks, the county GIS, I think they maintain a database on fire hydrants. So it's just trying to figure out, okay, what makes the most sense for countywide for us to cooperate with the county in gathering all this information about fire hydrants and consolidating it into one database from all these different fire districts, you know, so that's a good example of kind of the process that has to go through.
When do you expect this to be online for staff? And I'm wondering, with those Surface Pro laptops, how are they being used right now if this isn't ready?
I could ask John, I mean, they also have a need for just, you know, basic computers in the field too.
Okay.
I know, and we can also download our current existing paper files, yeah, onto the the Surface Pros. But I know Sam has, you know, in the past, without these Surface Pros, you know, anytime our system maps get all wrinkled and muddy and dirty, and he's out there, you know, we're spending a lot of time having Sam print up maps and collate maps and, you know, send them out to the field, and it's just, you know, it's
So they're
not-
already out at the field being utilized, which is a good thing.
Right.
And when do you think this will all be ready to go? Or are you doing it like you're working on Jenny Lind to get Jenny Lind all brought up, get all kind of bugs worked out, and say, okay, now we'll bring up Copper and West Point and stuff? So how long do you think it'll be till we're there?
This is at least, you know, a year-long process, probably, and it's not like it's a living document, so it's like you have to keep maintaining it. It's once you develop it, you just can't, you know, let it go, and it's, you know, it's carrot feeding.
I worked on ours for MSD, so I'm familiar with it.
Right.
It's a good thing to have, for sure, especially with a lot of employees.
When Sam gave his presentation to the engineering committee, and you know, when I asked him, you know, who is helping you, and he said essentially that he was doing it on his own, I was quick to point out to him that that's probably it's a full employment guarantee for him for quite some time. So he acknowledged that.
And yeah, go ahead.
I've had some fairly significant experience with this, the satellite survey equipment, and I hope that the one component that I haven't heard anybody mention is the elevation that you can get out of this information too. That this is probably as essential as location as for your pressure zone analysis, and having a guy go to a location and he wants to know how much higher this valve is than that one down there and how much lower it is than that one up there. Will that information be on a layer of this GIS printout?
I think that gets into the issue of, at least this lays the foundation where some kind of effort like that would be cost effective. And so you at least can capture that data and be sure it's not gonna get lost down the road, you know. So I know that with the type of GPS units they use, that it will give you, you know, relatively good information probably for like the Ebbets Pass water system, since you have such large amounts of topography, you know, where you're dealing with like sewer manholes and stuff like that, and really precise elevation changes. It's probably something we'd have to go out and survey those elevations, and then, but like I said, once you've got a good database and good mapping, it's worthwhile to maybe capture that information where you need to at a higher precision, and then you can bring that data into your database and be sure you're gonna preserve that data.
What I would encourage you to do, just as a kind of a baseline, is if we have a subscription to you know, like the professional version of Google Earth, anytime that you have your cursor on a particular spot on the Earth's surface, it'll also give you the elevation of that spot. So, you know, it'd be really kind of interesting to go out and write those down, and then go out in the field, check them to see how dependable that would be, because that'd be and if it is accurate, then it would be a heck of a lot easier than sending somebody out in a truck to field check everything.
Can't you integrate Google Earth in your GIS?
Yeah, I mean, I know that Sam has published maps that can be imported into Google Earth, and I think that is, you know, probably there's more platforms and that are more geared towards agency use, you know, that for our type of agency, they've, you know, the people that write the software, they know what kind of groups use their software and for what purposes, and so they market their programs accordingly, you know. So for water agencies or sewer districts, they've kind of focused in on that as one of their customer bases, and have packaged some of their applications accordingly.
Yeah. Well, you know, once you get your your database, you know, your ground level one done, you start talking to the end users and ask them the information they're looking for, and getting their input with what needs to be on there would be really helpful too.
Okay, does that conclude the questions from here? Anybody from the public have any questions about this? Yes.
Have you addressed the connectivity of the, how are you going to communicate with the laptops? I know in our area, the topography does not work well. And that's a concern that I've had. I remember 2 years ago when we had the fire, or 3 years ago, we had the fire. It was a humongous problem with the cell phones trying to talk. So how are you going to have laptops talking to your mainframe? Yeah, so that is, it's not, there is a certain level of usefulness you can have offline. So I think for a lot of our purposes, you know, we're in an emergency situation. I think, you know, we have our radios, you know, so the one person-to-person communication, I think, is maybe a little bit of a different issue. But as far as our system maps, they'll still have a pretty high level of degree of functionality on their laptops or Surface Pros or devices without necessarily having a cellular connection or Wi-Fi connection. So,
So you're not accessing a database of software is downloaded on the
device,
piece of equipment. Okay.
Right. And then when you go, the way it gets updated is when you do have
Right.
a connection available, Wi-Fi, or when they go back to the office, or they have cellular connection, then the information can transfer.
So when Sam sends out an update on all the maps, everybody gets those, and then they're on their device updated.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, we did just make an expenditure for publishing software that Sam, and basically it takes these GIS maps and databases, and it publishes kind of a smart map that can be distributed. So, and once it's published, it's on the device, and you don't necessarily need a Wi-Fi connection.
Okay, if there's no further questions,
Do we have a budget already for this project?
No, we don't. In fact, well, that's kind of, this leads into the next. So there's a lot to this, you know, that we're just scratching the surface. So this program's kind of in its infancy, but, you know, that's a valid question. And, you know, I think we do have the next budget cycle coming up. So, you know, I'm going to have to be looking at my department and talking with the IT department and the finance manager about, you know, all these different things right here, the software, the hardware, the workforce, that's all necessary to make the program happen, so.
You know, if I could make a suggestion, you're gonna be bringing it to us to budget, I think it might be a good idea, at least for me, to have the Sam who's working on this and the other IT staff work with the operations staff to find out what they're looking for. So when you come to us, we're gonna say, we wanna see this information in the GIS system first, so we could see. I think it's very valuable to have a GIS system, but I think breaking it down in pieces might be easier for us to, approve.
Yeah.
Those are very valid points, and it's something that we have discussed when we set up this project with Sam as a project lead, is to go out and find out what the user requirements are, what we really need out of the system, and what are some of our wants. Obviously, we're not going to be able to afford the Cadillac version, and what Sam has been doing and working with the people in operations is identifying what their needs are. What do they really need to see out of the system? And how can we do an iterative process to give us first the basics and then do layer. All that will be presented as part of the budget process. What we're doing now is just identifying how we're starting this process moving forward from what we had originally into this, and what our needs are. The next item I'm going to bring to you is a direct response of Sam having to work on this project almost 100% of his time. But it is going to be laid out. We are going to be able to provide you the hardware that we're going to need in the first year, the software we're going to need in the first year, how we're going to lay it out, what levels of service are going to be provided in year 1, year 2, year 3, and what type of ongoing support are we going to need, both in resources of software, subscriptions, maintenance costs on any of the software, and obviously at some point there's going to be replacement of the hardware as well.
On the, since I have been part of the budget process, does that start in the finance committee and then come to the board?
Yes, it does. You will see the preliminary budget before the board does.
So can we conclude that this picture represents Sam's staff when he gets?
Yes, it does.
That's actually Sam's brain.
It's what?
That's his brain.
Is his brain?
And somewhere in that picture is Waldo.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion on this matter? My colleague on my left here is requesting a break, and I'd like to have a break as well, so let's come back in about 7 minutes, okay? 7.
So what's your position here in the district? What's your name? You know what you might think of this?
Resume our meeting, please.
Is that 7 minutes?
7, exactly, I think.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, you don't know. Let me get a couple back.
All right, we are now at item 4C. This is a discussion action regarding the amendment of the fiscal year 2018-19 personnel allocation. Jeffrey Meyer.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board. This is a continuing item we first discussed at the mid-year budget review, and we have brought it back to your group here, or your board here, for consideration. When Charles provided you an overview of the GIS system and the effort we are undertaking at this point, he talked about Sam Singh. And Sam is not a full engineer, but he's got engineering background, and he helped the department tremendously in the engineering world. Now his time is dedicated towards GIS. One of the things that we have looked at, and I believe I even brought this up earlier in the fiscal year, is that our engineering department has been, as far as engineers are concerned, constrained. You have Charles as district engineer and Bob Goodwin as an engineer. And Bob has been spending a significant amount of his time on wastewater projects and also permitting in support of utilities. Charles has tried to capture everything else. And it's really, when you're looking at the number of projects he's put out, Reach One, the TechEye, and all this process, he really doesn't have the time to really he has minimal time to be able to oversee the entire department, let alone provide guidance to employees, because he's so immersed into these water projects. And what we're looking at doing is to try to expand the capabilities of the engineering department by bringing in another engineer to look over and do the detailed work on water projects. Your capital R&R, which we've talked about for years, has a number of water projects available or within the 5-year CIP. Everything from pipeline replacement to tank management program, things that we're really not staying on top of. We need to get ahead of. A couple of weeks ago, Damon was talking about his weekend pipeline leak repairs program that is reactive. We want to be proactive. We put money in the budget for pipeline replacement for larger problem sections. We need an engineer to help design these and get these out to bid and get people to working on them. We've looked at options of maybe contracting out a number of these services. However, when you have contract design engineers, you still have to manage them. And that takes a significant amount of time and effort. Plus, we want to build that in-house knowledge of our system. The GIS system, I think, President Thomas, you spoke about using it for identifying elevations for pressure zones and everything else that we need to be able to look at. We need to be able to have an engineer that understands pressure zones and can maintain the systems, whether it's the pumps or the tank levels and tank replacement programs. We have to look at what the state calls unaccounted for water loss, which is basically leakage in our systems. Because when we do this new 55 gallons per day plus outdoors, they're going to be really looking at one of the components is how much water are you losing through your systems. So we have a number of projects that are coming forward on the water side. Unfortunately, we just don't have the resources to be able to handle it. So our request is for you to add another engineer into the mix. And the first question that comes to mind is how are you going to pay for it? Within the capital R&R funds, each budgetary year we estimate how much time an engineer or an employee is going to spend on those projects. And then we charge that time, employees' salary and benefits, to those projects within 125 the water fund, 135 the sewer fund. A good engineer, you can easily account for 70% of his time on projects, especially bringing them in from the private industry, because they're used to building projects. What we're looking at here is the same thing. What can we do? How are we going to pay for it? And it's coming out of the R&R funds, because that's where we have our project funding. A portion of it, obviously, will have to be absorbed by the general fund, and that's something we'll build in next year's budget. Looking at the numbers, we have enough capacity this year because between the recruitment process, the interviews and everything else, this person won't come on board until May at the earliest. So we're only looking at 2 months of that. The idea here is to get the engineer in place during this summertime process to start designing projects so that when we go out, the optimal time to go out to bid is the winter time. You've had the Reach 1 contract that's coming up now, and you reach the tech-up line. It's best to be able to have these go out to bid so that you have, and these construction companies have an opportunity to lay out those schedules for the next year. So the timing of this could be any better to bring this person on. We looked at the R&R projects for the water side, and right now, the 18-19 CIP budget was $9.8 million for 17 water projects. So we have a number of projects that this individual can work on. The question is this sustainable? Remember, your R&R program is going on as part, as I see it, in almost perpetuity, because it's like painting the bridge. Once you get to completing, you go back and restart all over again. And right now, we're pulling in about $3.2 million a year in water R&R funds, and that's predominantly what will be funding this position. And with that, I'm open for any questions.
I was noticing, we have 2 engineers on staff currently, and then Sam, who's a tech. And I was just looking for it, I don't have it here with me, but just recently we got a personnel allocation from AWA, and how, Damon, I think you just left there, how many engineers did they have on staff? It seemed like it was maybe 4, or at least 3 or 4, and I think they're a smaller district.
So they had a supervisor of engineering, and then they had 2 engineering techs when I was leaving.
Okay, so they really only had one engineer?
Yeah.
Okay.
The caveat there is the general manager is a professional engineer also. So if an engineering tech is working on a project and it needs to be reviewed, oftentimes the GM will grab that project, review it, and stamp it.
We thought about that, but we decided to get an attorney instead. I don't know if we made the right decision there.
I can make up a stamp if you want.
I think the agency near to us who has the overload, or not overload, of engineers is Tuolumne. They're,
That's who I was thinking of.
yeah,
That's
they
who's-
have
okay.
a big staff of engineering. But, you know, they're a little bit bigger than us.
Right, we've been talking about this for a little while, about the need for an engineer here. and just-
Yeah,
and, I
that
mean, it
is
wasn't-
perfectly reasonable.
Wasn't that long ago we were hiring, involving a lot more outside engineers, and even had our staff engineer, I mean, our head engineer was an outside person at one point, which didn't seem right, so this does seem like, my question is, the $15,000 that is affected here, that's just for the rest of this fiscal year?
Yes, because as I mentioned, the hiring process, we probably wouldn't be able to bring somebody on until mid to end of May. So we're only looking at one.
And what percentage of that 15,000 it would be coming out of the capital improvement, approximately?
About 70%.
Oh,
And I'm
okay.
basing that upon what I see Bob billing
Okay.
on his projects. So that's what I'm looking at.
Okay.
Okay, I just have one question. I'm looking at the personnel allocation by department, and under engineering, there are 2 slots open, civil engineer and construction inspector. Are those, you know, that what Charles wants?
What's, are you looking
On
at?
page 1 of 2, personnel app.
Before, can I just add on that, because as I'm looking at these allocations where it says
Yeah.
8 there, does that mean we have 8 engineers?
No, that's the entire allocation for the department. Now, if you go back.
8 full-time equivalent.
Exactly.
So how many people do you have?
That's what we're requesting, 8. They have 7 right now. And if you look at you're gonna be looking at the right 2 columns. And right now, if you look at that, the adopted under 1819, they have 1 district engineer, 1 senior civil engineer, 2 construction inspectors, 1 engineering analyst, 1 engineering tech, and 1 admin tech.
So the amendment is what you're asking us today?
Yes, ma'am.
For a civil engineer.
Sorry.
Yes, adding a civil engineer.
Okay, is everybody through? May I ask a question? Okay.
Can you?
All right. Well, I get
Been asked by now.
I get overridden all the time here, but anyway, I just did a little pencil pushing on this. If it's 15,000 for 2 months, $7,500 per month, if you allocate, 33% for burden, I mean, can we hire a civil engineer for $30 an hour? I'm kind of skeptical about that.
Why? Oh, okay.
You're probably looking in the range within our salary schedule. It's about $80,000 to $90,000 a year on salary. Now, can we, and Charles can address what level of expertise he needs.
But your 7,500 per month times 12, that's $90,000, but that's with the burden and everything. I mean, that's with benefits. You're saying.
You're looking at, that's 15,000 salary and benefits.
Yes. But are we mixing apples and oranges here? You said that the salary would be about 90,000, but if you put, you know, I'm not disputing that we need somebody, but I just want to be realistic, and I don't want any surprises later when we find out that it's costing a lot more than that to put this person on the payroll.
You're probably looking at $150,000 a year.
Yes. Okay. That's
Salaries and benefits.
okay. That's what I wanted to hear. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the personnel allocation for fiscal year 1819, and we can continue talking about this forever. I just had an motion on the table.
Okay,
Yes.
I'll
So-
second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and Cindy, you don't have a question?
So this engineer would be a union member, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and I was kind of following up on his, we're looking at 150,000 going forward,
Mhm.
beginning next fiscal year. And were you gonna use a consultant recruit, this engineer, or were you gonna be able to do that in staff?
We do that in-house.
Okay, and, I haven't gone through the budget with you yet, but adding another staff of 150,000, you feel pulling the money out of the different programs for capital improvement, we're gonna be okay? What am I trying to get to? You know, do we have the money there? Is it pulling out of there, and I do believe in charging, you know, the projects for staff time, I think that's proper.
Yes.
But going forward, are we gonna be able to sustain that, you know, with enough projects and?
Oh, we certainly will.
Oh. Charles, Damon, Michael and I sat down and talked about this at length, discussing what projects, the needs, the GIS program, where we're moving, and it was a unanimous decision that we will, at least in my lifetime and probably beyond, we'll always have assets to work on and be able to charge. And we'll also be looking at these when grants come around. So if there's grant money and we've got grant applications out for the redwood tank replacements, I can foresee at least 10 years of projects for this individual.
And just to respond to that a little bit more, this actually was scheduled to be on the agenda at the last meeting, and I pumped the brakes a little bit with that exact question of just to double check. You know, a lot of this happened before I started, but my question was exactly that, is this really the most pressing need? Or do we have the resources to provide for it, especially in light of an organizational assessment that we'll be doing? Is this, you know, is this the right time and the right use of our resources? And as Jeff said, we all, at the end of that process, we all agreed, you know, we have no shortage of construction projects. We have reserves to implement those projects. We have a little bit of a bottleneck, and this is no disrespect to Charles at all, because it's not his fault, a little bit of a bottleneck in engineering and making sure that we can get those projects done and out the door. So it was agreed on by all of us that yes, this is a high priority and we need it right now.
So Sam is gonna like focus on the GIS side of engineering. And so you've looked at, instead of hiring an employee at $150,000, and then this is gonna be an employee that's gonna be here for a while, it's gonna get raises and stuff like that. And then you have retirement benefits. Is that really the right way to go, having another body in here for, I don't know how many projects versus maybe outsourcing that service to have engineering work on that project?
Yeah, and we talked about it. We didn't necessarily crunch the numbers in terms of the whole life cycle, but we did. What I was impressing on everybody was just that any addition to the org chart is very hard to undo, and it's a major long-term commitment, which is why we slowed it down a little bit to make sure this really was a pressing high priority, higher than any of the other personnel needs that we have, and there are some. And that was where we arrived at the end of the day.
And, you know, I don't know off the top of my head, and you might not either, but you know, what was the total cost of engineering annually, and looking at the in-house cost, and then looking at benefits going forward and raises versus having an engineering firm that does everything that we don't have to pay benefit costs to?
I know we do use outside engineering firms a lot as well. There's no way we could do all of the engineering that we need to do in-house. So it's a balance of trying to navigate how much of that we can do in-house and the in-house resources we need versus how much we need to farm out. So we're kind of, I think, always trying to toe that line.
It seems like when we're farming out enough work for a full-time position, it's much cheaper to bring it in-house, even with all the benefits, it seemed like, in my experience here. And I don't know.
As long as we're talking about it and looking at that,
Yeah.
is what we need to do.
We've talked about using outside consultants for, or outside vendors for different projects. And it seemed like, you know, 6, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, that was a complaint that this district used way too many outside vendors and way too many, and it seems that we've gotten away from that. We're doing most of our construction in-house, and when in our engineering, it'd be great to bring all of that in-house and use our own people and use this capital. I think we'd be using less of our capital improvement project fund for doing this, and 70%. And that's a perpetual. I don't think we're going to change. We had an opportunity or discussion to change. I don't think we're going to be changing that anytime soon. As far as where that we will always have the CIP fund, and if 70% of this new person's salary is going to be coming out of that fund, I think it'll be easy to fund it. I mean, that's what I'm looking at. I got that 70% just today.
When you look at the unfunded liability for CalPERS, and, you know, we just have a $45,000 a month medical payment for retirees, we have to keep that in mind, that we can't be putting that on a capital R&R fund. You know, so the more we add, that's the part I'm saying, can we sustain that, you know, 25, potentially 30 years, depending on how old the person is that's coming in. I just want us to be aware of that and do our due diligence for thinking and then make the decision and moving.
Yeah, those are great points. We definitely did not take this lightly.
Oh, I imagine.
Yeah.
And the other part of this equation, which I haven't brought up, is over time, you will have retirements in that department. So as we go through this process, in 5, 10 years, maybe an engineer will retire, and you can reevaluate it at that particular point in time.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Rebecca, would you please? Oh, well, just a moment. It's been pointed out to me that the public may want to weigh in on this. Anybody in the public want to talk about this issue? See, I told you. Go ahead and poll.
Director Edelman?
Yes.
Director Cicada?
Yes.
President Thomas?
Yes.
Oh, you already voted?
She voted yesterday.
I'm special.
She voted on her birthday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we have item 4D. This is what Mr. Lester has been waiting for the whole time. Discussion action regarding awarding construction contract for the Ebbets Pass Reach 1 water pipeline replacement project. Charles Palmer.
So just to give a brief project summary, it is, this project is along the Highway 4 corridor. It runs from approximately 100 Dam Road, which is just below Avery, and all along the Highway 4 corridor, all the way to, you know, approximately half mile below Forest Meadows, something like that. And this is a map of the alignment there in red. And the projects, so we're replacing 23,000 feet of 12-inch water main, and then that's the new pipeline. And then 1,300 feet of new 8-inch water main that will be installed below Forest Meadows. And that's replacement of an existing 8-inch water transmission main that was installed in 1965. The pipeline's mostly along the south shoulder of the highway, and there is about 1,000 feet section of pipeline up by Commercial Way, between Commercial Way and Meridian Road, that's on Forestry Service property there through an easement. That's the existing lines there, we're putting it back in the same place. We're replacing all along the whole line, we're replacing PRV stations, fire hydrants, and air valves. It'll be mostly performed by that trench method. And there will be a few crossings of Highway 4, there's about 5 crossings of Highway 4, where the service, to serve the folks on the other side of the highway, that will be done by, traditionally, Caltrans wants those done by Tunnel 4 or Jack.
Excuse me just one second. President
Yes.
Thomas, could I just ask for a 2-minute break,
Sure,
please?
of course.
To talk.
Okay, we've been requested to take a 2-minute break for Director Underhill. Well, we can get back underway.
Okay, so, we've been planning this project for several years now. And it's been, for the past year, we've been working through the design process. So we have the bid opening on February 26th. Those are the bid results there.
$6.744 million. And if anybody had any specific questions about the breakdown of, there were 30 different bid items. These are the 3 lowest bidders presented here, so if anybody has any specific questions about any of those specific line items in there, I can try to answer those questions. So the next steps, if we award, requesting the board awards the contract today, we would go ahead and execute the contract and issue the bonds in April, and, you know, we would begin construction in May. It could be, you know, still have to get material, or material, get material, so, you know, it's not gonna be, hitting the ground in May. We're not gonna have everything really going full speed ahead, but, we would start in May. So complete construction run, the summer of 2020. So including, you know, and now in the way we account for capital, for our own inside labor, so our inspectors, my time, labor of our engineers that might work on the project, and consultants, you know, other engineering, support, any, environmental consultants, biologists, archaeologists, all those professional service agreements would also be billed with the project, including our own staff time. So in addition to that contract amount of $6.744 million, we have, including those other costs, the total project cost is estimated to be about $7.5 million. And in the current fiscal year, we've got $1.5 million goes through the end of June, and then next budget we have to allocate $6 million. And the current water capital R&R fund does have those funds available. And if you have questions about how that may impact future projects and, you know, other projects we have in our capital program, that's a valid question. And you know, we will be soon presenting the updated CIP budget in the next month. And, you know, so I can tell you there are adequate funds to cover this. So that's the end of my presentation. Any questions?
I have,
Yes, go ahead.
okay, I went through the bid abstract,
Yeah.
and I was looking at, you know, the different areas that were affected, and it was kind of hard for me to look at the fact that Mazingo was, you know, 200,000 more than another company in a particular task, is that what you call them?
Sure.
Or $200,000 less. Does that be, what we're looking at is the bottom line, right?
Right, and to be honest, you know, bidders have a little bit of a strategy in creating their bids. I mean, it's not necessarily reflect the totally actual cost. 'Cause I mean, like, for instance, like the bore and jack or highway crossings, you know, that involves like sheeting, shoring, and bracing, and it also involves traffic control. So they've got to kind of take that task and divide it up among these items. And so some contractors may just allocate funds in a slightly different way than another contractor might, or bidder might allocate them.
One of the things that I believe that I heard when we were first started talking about this project is that you were not going to be using the pipe that was there. You were going to completely replace it, lay it by its side, or put it on top. Wasn't that the description of what?
We are either going to run parallel to, or we can, and there's space. It's pretty tight in there. There's not a lot of space. There's also, for half of the alignment, there's an underground buried electrical conduit, high, you know, electrical transmission line. And so we have to stay away from that with enough distance from that so we don't impact that facility. So there's not a lot of space. So where we can dig a separate trench and run parallel to the line, that's what we're doing. Where we can't do that, we have to set up these temporary above-ground bypass lines so we can continue to keep all the customers in service while we actually
remove the old line, dispose of the old line, and put the new line in the same location.
Now, you said you're gonna go across Highway 4, 4 different places?
Five
Five?
locations.
5 locations. Ay, ay, ay. You're gonna do that at midnight, right?
Those are tunnels, so that's actually, they'll dig a pit and they bring out a tunneling machine, they drop the tunneling machine down in there.
Oh.
And it drills under the highway, so it can be done during the daytime.
Uh-huh,
It,
and not impact.
Right, and that's why
traffic.
Caltrans requires that method, because they don't want, to, open up the highway, a full length across the highway, because it's just too disruptive to traffic.
Right, okay, now you said south of Highway 4, so is that the Forest Meadows side?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, and we have had already, inquiries from Forest Meadows. I think Joel, will be working,
Right.
obviously, we're gonna have a whole program to keep our customers informed.
Yeah, because I read that you're gonna have a town hall?
I think we're still formulating, go ahead.
That's the Copper Cove Town Hall, we haven't scheduled.
Oh, you haven't, but we will have a town hall for,
Yeah,
We'll
have-
be doing some outreach on this for sure.
okay.
Any other questions?
Do we have the permits from Caltrans already, or are you gonna have the contractor do that permit?
No, we do have, we've secured the permit from Caltrans, so all that's necessary is typically with these permits, they require both parties to sign on as parties to the permit. So we've done all the difficult legwork on that, and so at this point, it's gonna be pretty simple for the contractor to sign onto that permit.
Okay, Charles, when you have three of the lowest bidders as close as these are, I mean, that sort of points out to me that they were all looking at the same project, the same set of plans. The other bidders that went up much, much higher, I'm not sure what project they were looking at. But it's still not lost upon me that our consultant helped us really underestimate the cost of this project. So my request would be that the Castle consultants not be rewarded with further consultation on this job. They messed things up, in my opinion. But
Okay, I was considering using them. I was considering bringing them to the board. I think maybe if there's an opportunity somehow to sit down and talk that over.
well, we just need to have a debrief on that. So,
Right, sure.
because
And I do feel that it was partially my responsibility for not getting the cost estimate up to date, especially on these larger projects. I have to do a little more due diligence and because it impacts a lot of things. I mean, especially our finances. It's difficult to scramble and to come up with the finances. Then, we're just lucky we happen to have the money available, the funds available. But, after this project, that next project, we may not, so.
that's what's lingering in my mind, is you have to take something away from another project to fund this one. And I'm not saying that I would have done it any differently than you did, but I don't know,
We do have some large projects coming up out in the Copper Cove area,
Mhm.
and, they're on the sewer fund side, and it's.
That's going to be rough, yeah.
What was the original budget or
Well, we expected this.
cost estimate on this?
5,
It was 5 million. We thought we could do this, so. But I still think that probably that cost overrun is due to the Delta smelt and stuff that we expect to encounter up there.
Well, Charles, with I was want to ask a question about supplementals or add-ons during the project. With one bidder being $2 million higher and another one $3 million higher, they may be accurate. I mean, we don't know. An estimate is a guess of future construction costs, and that's kind of what we're looking at here, a prediction of what we might run into. So when we do run into it, how are supplementals, are they allowed, or is this a?
So this is the public bidding process, so in this case, we have to award to the lowest bidder. So, if, there are supplementals or.
Change
extra
or,
work,
change orders? Yeah.
It's somewhat of a judgment call. I mean, it's, you have to be out in the field between our staff and their staff. They have to point out that there's an issue, the engineering has to agree there's an issue, and, yeah, it's not, typically, if the contract's ambiguous, or it's not written into the contract, or there's some significant change that impacts their costs, then, we just can't say, no, can't charge it, we have to take a legitimate look at it and take under consideration what they're saying. So, you always hope that you don't run into that, and that you've covered everything, all contingencies, and you've thought of everything, but, that can sometimes be challenging.
Why didn't Mazingo have erosion control?
Have to.
All of them, I think all of them had erosion control. I think it just, we called it out. Maybe you're looking at the bottom of the bid abstract there. Yeah. So it was actually a bid item. So it was that, stormwater pollution prevention and best management. So that's what that item 3 is, that SWIP/. So that's pretty much a state regulation now. Any project that you have that, when you're digging and disturbing soil, you just can't let that turbidity and erosion run off into storm drains that will eventually work its way down into the river and pollute the river.
Okay, so they're gonna take care of it themselves as opposed to having a subcontractor?
Not necessarily.
Includes a subcontractor at that price.
Pardon?
They're hiring a contractor, I
She's
would
looking
imagine.
down here
at
that there's
price.
Yep.
nothing in that box.
Yeah, it's at $300,000 is what they're
Yeah.
bidding for them.
Yeah,
They're
it would
pretty
have been,
pricey.
is on the bottom of the bid abstract, the printed version, does it say the company's name down there next to erosion?
It has,
No, the other
No,
two, Tiger
no, the
Mountain
other two
do.
have it, but
Okay, so
Mazingo
that-
doesn't.
Yes, you're right then, yeah. So
They'll take care of it.
they're doing it themselves.
Okay, I'm not gonna see another contractor out there.
Well, we
You might.
we may actually hire, we have our inspectors who actually, they do a lot of training on this particular subject. In fact, they're going up to Shasta College, later this month for, 2 days of training specifically on this erosion control and this man. And so Jared Gravitt is certified in this area as an inspector, so.
Oh, okay.
It's something we dedicate resources to.
Is Mozingo a contractor that the district's worked with in the past? And I think you already mentioned that they were. What projects were we involved with them on?
The one that comes to mind is Flying Acres. They did the Flying Acres job.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're,
And now
yeah.
they're currently actually, at the same time, they're potentially under contract with us. They're under contract with Blue Lake Springs at this time.
Right,
for
yeah.
Replacing their entire system.
Okay.
And that's a USDA project.
What was our experience, if you remember, on cost overruns or change orders or supplementals on Flying Acres?
I don't recall any significant
like-
items. I know there were.
Here comes.
Here comes the money man.
The guy who has the figures in his head.
Can't help
Yeah.
himself.
Yes, nothing is in my lap. They came in right on budget. It was actually a little bit under, and just to amend what Charles said, they also worked on the West Point Water Transmission Line project about 8 years ago. When we did the tank replacement, we used Prop 84 money, and they did I think it's got Main Street, all the downtown areas, and it met all our expectations.
Okay.
What about, I don't see a contingency. Sometimes you put 10% on there for those types of
Oh,
things.
for the change orders?
Yeah, so I don't see that on there. And then, is the boring and the bore and jack, that's in case we come across rock?
That's just.
Is there
the-
like a rock
that's-
clause at
that's-
all?
That's the mandated boring. Under,
There is no rock clause in the contract, so, and it is possible we can run into rock.
suspect that.
Rock underground?
Yeah, it's a little, you know, on Reach 3A, we only had one location where we ran into a little bit of rock. I think it's gonna be a little bit more challenging on this project.
Who was the contractor for Reach 3A?
That was
Tykert.
TNS Construction.
Yeah,
TNS?
Tykert.
That's Tykert?
No.
Oh, no?
No,
Oh,
TNS
no,
is
they're
not
from
that.
Sacramento, right.
And they didn't bid, or they just didn't come in?
They didn't bid.
They didn't like.
Charles, looking closely at this bid abstract, the firm there that's listed in that center column, Tyke Art, I wonder what the bid would have been from Tykert. It's
Well, you're just really funny today.
it's,
It's a new firm.
huh?
A spelling error.
Well, it's consistent, but,
Okay, I'll take responsibility.
And Director Cicada, I think to get to your point, without, in the absence of a line item for contingencies, it's probably built into each of those line items, that the contractor should have taken that into account.
yeah. Mr. Lester, why
Yes.
don't you come to the podium? I have to ask you a question.
Who's Lester?
He works for Mazingo.
This gentleman is representing Mazingo, and in order for him to justify it to his boss that he sat here all day listening to us, the question is, are you going to be out there on that job?
I've heard that, but nothing official yet.
Can we depend on you to do a good job for us?
Absolutely.
Okay. Working conscientiously to keep costs down and no change orders.
Right, is that a promise? No change order?
I can't promise that.
We need that on tape right now.
Okay. Do you have any questions for us?
No.
Because I think we're getting ready to approve this contract, so you should get.
Getting ready to
I would
vote on
like
it
to,
anyway.
yeah, I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 2019 20, awarding the construction contract for the Ebbets Pass Reach 1 Water Pipeline Replacement Project, CCWD CIP number 11085.
I'll second that.
And then I have a question for Lester.
Okay, like, have you done any work with any
Last
other utilities in Calaveras County besides the ones that we've mentioned?
Myself,
No, but, well, Mazingo, why,
Murphy?
we've done work at Murphy's. I personally have done jobs for Caltrans in Valley Springs.
okay.
We
Murphy
have
Sanitary
operations
District?
and stuff like that.
They did a great job for us.
Okay, you have a good experience then?
I do, and I'm gonna ask him a question, because we did have, issues with rock, so we had change orders, but it was time and materials, and it worked really nicely. And my question to you would be, looking at all these line items that you bid on, can you give me any, idea of where you might see there could be a change order? You know, would it be, if you come across rock and now you didn't bid for all that extra time, to, jackhammer it out, like for instance, what happened at Murphy's? Or, there was the erosion control that we didn't take care of, but you do have that on here. But can you give me any suggestion of where we might want to look, just to give us a heads up? Well,
Remember,
it
you
could
only
be
have,
this
you only have
way.
$200,000 to work with here before we're into the next bidder.
Yeah. I can't
Any
speak to
idea?
that. I didn't bid the project. I honestly haven't the specifications or I can't speak to that without looking at the project. Getting into that.
Okay, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, so why are you here?
Oh,
Thank you.
Cindy,
I don't mean, I'm just kind of wondering.
I don't mean to be disrespectful, but
Yeah,
Well, I mean, you know, you want to hear what we're talking about, not so much to answer our question.
I mean, the main thing we're concerned with is if it's gonna be awarded or not. That's why I'm here.
yeah, the bottom line. I do have one question. We have Indian, you know, burial grounds or anything, and I really don't know how that works or how it is in that section of Highway 4.
Isn't that addressed in our, that should be addressed in our CEQA and already been addressed, notifying the tribes and
We have a
whatnot.
pretty good CEQA document. We had some I have to say, we had some excellent archaeologists out there. There is they did focus on one location on the project that was determined to be not within the
However, I just want to preface this with the fact that they have a very tight relationship with Caltrans. Caltrans likes them to, participate in their projects. So, that's something I think, it's on the horizon and something I have to keep in the back of my mind moving forward.
Yeah. Because we're hearing that from, where are we? Jenny Lynn.
That's a different situation there, because that's a registered site. So that's a much more challenging situation.
Okay, well, you'll take care of it.
I don't see anything on here. Is the Native Americans gonna be on site and we have to pay their hourly fee to be standing there?
My guess is that's probably covered in the environmental mitigation measure line item. I don't know, Charles, if that might be incorrect, but that's probably where we identified that issue is in the CEQA document.
Well, could we make sure that wouldn't be something that, we have to pay for that?
Well,
That would have been addressed in the CEQA document.
Okay.
that was the supplemental, the anticipated supplemental is gonna take it from 6.7 to 7.5.
And basically my approach is that I treat them like any other consultant that we must have to get the project done, whether it's a biologist or a SWIP professional. Sometimes we bring on an expert on SWIPs and erosion controls because there's liability. It is a project-specific permit issued by the state, and if you're in violation of that permit, you will get fined. So, we have to make sure that we've got our bases covered. And, I heard, the next county over had a problem on one of their projects. So, we don't want to be, in that situation if we can avoid it. So it's well worth having good consultants that can give you good direction.
Okay, would anyone in the public like to comment on this? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Would you please poll the board?
Director Underhill?
Yes.
Director Radigan?
Yes.
Director Cicada?
Yes.
President Thomas?
Yes? You can go make the telephone call now.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for watching all the rest of our show, too.
All right, moving on to 4E. We have, Damon, you have a report for us.
In your guys' packet should be the department report for operations for February. As you guys can see in the department report, there's a lot of work associated with February storms, which I'll touch upon with the slideshow here in a second. But really, I just want to impress upon you that it traveled across all disciplines. I mean, from my desk through to meter reading, everybody was affected. As you all know, as we all were throughout the county, and there was a very concerted effort between county OEM and the road department and CCWD and other utilities to communicate actively regarding the work effort. So I just want to touch upon that. Two of our wastewater facilities were forced to discharge during the rain event, which is a violation. However, it's a much smaller violation than overspilling or overtopping your dam. That was Arnold wastewater discharged 200,000 gallons during a rain event, and West Point discharged approximately 50,000 gallons.
Damon, do you notify DWR before you do that?
We do, actually, we notify the state water boards and we notify Cal OES. So what we do first is we reach out to our state regulator for water boards, and we say, hey, this is our situation, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna go ahead and submit with Cal OES and with CWIX, and we're gonna CC you on all emails and all correspondence, and they just say, thank you very much, appreciate it, and then they move about their day. So this, yes, they're getting slammed with calls. One of these items I wanted to point out to y'all is, this is from Copper. I believe this was located out in Poker Flat. So this was a 2-inch water main, and when it was installed, this is what's called Bluebell, which is a thin wall PVC pipe, Schedule 40. So you can see how when it was initially installed, it was bent to begin with. And so then it developed a leak, and you can see that the soil has not been very friendly to the piece of metal, which I'm assuming this is galvanized, although I can't really tell. Underneath all
The nipple?
Right, and so one thing that I think is important to note for you guys to see is that when the developer was installing these water mains, they would put these valves at the end of this service, or at this water main, to nowhere, because what happened is when the trench was still open and the plumbing was installed, it allowed them to flush the line. So they left the valve on here, flushed it, cleaned it all up, took whatever samples they needed to take, which presumably back in the day was probably nothing. And then once the water cleared up, they shut the valve and they put a plug in it. And so a lot of these are starting to fail out in the copper area. And so this is a lot of what our guys struggle with day to day out in that neck of the woods when it comes to water main repair. So just to kind of give you.
Well, in addition, just real quick on that, in addition to the service lines to nowhere, that Bluebell is in a lot of other actual service lines as well, that it's causing a lot of problems anywhere it is.
Yeah, and even if there were no valve installed, Bluebell was just circumspect to begin with, right? I mean, we need to remove the Bluebell. It doesn't deal with pressure very well at all. And so as our folks complete these repairs, you can see they cut these out. And so that's part of the positive work effort associated with O&M. Just to kind of recap some of the events that took place in the month of February, this is a service line replacement in the Rancho Calaveras area off of O'Reilly. This, as a matter of fact, was the day one of the weekend work effort. So we had 4 field staff working that Saturday, repaired 5 different service lines. And then we took a weekend off due to the rain. And last weekend, we actually repaired 10 service lines over the weekend. So it's successful. Folks from all the different service areas are participating. So hopefully this helps the district get ahead of the service line leak issue in the Rancho Calaveras area.
Before you go on, go back to that slide. That trunk hanging down there is the Vacon, the vacuum thing. Can you actually dig a trench like that with the Vacon truck?
You can, I mean, yeah, I mean.
So that one wasn't taken, huh?
Say that again?
Was that one dug with a like trencher or
No, that was dug with the Vacon. So,
okay,
so
wow.
we saw cut that asphalt.
All right.
And we just vacuumed all of that out of there. And generally, you know, to reiterate, they're all usually in native soil.
Okay, yeah.
So provided that we have the pressure washer working properly, we can usually break up pretty quickly. It's not compacted, right? Yeah. So it's usually a pretty quick work effort.
Just curious, how deep do you have to saw cut something like that to make that happen?
Well, generally the asphalt's going to be between usually about 4 inches, not very much. The saw cutting happens fairly quickly, and then the service line, we have them anywhere from 18 inches to almost 7 feet deep, depending on where they're at in the topography and how they were installed. So that really kind of touches upon the work effort that happens on the weekends. Is usually staff really focus on the low-hanging fruit, and they'll actually. And so you might hear from customers, hey, you know, I've called in this leak for a month, 6 months. It might be troublesome, it might be problematic due to depth. It might straddle multiple utilities. We might need traffic control. And so that's generally why stuff will happen during the week, or it'll take longer to occur because we need to mobilize other staff to get after it. On the weekends, though, it's usually pretty cut and dry. This one looks like it's probably about a little over 3 feet deep, I would say. So this is just a depiction of the leak detection training that all distribution staff participated in the Rancho area. All of those appurtenances, I wish I could zoom in here.
Just the asphalt.
Let's see here. Okay, all of these devices, this is what's called a correlator. So this is one water meter that has this listed. It's essentially like a sonar device, and then this is another water meter. And what you do is you push a signal, or you open up the water supply, and push a signal against the flowing water, and they listen to the return of that signal, and they can actually pinpoint or estimate where on the service line the leak may be. And so then, we have one of these devices, the district owns one, and it's kind of an art to using them, and so we participated in a training effort with an expert in using the correlator, and he helped us locate 4 different leaks. And so it was pretty successful. One we actually repaired today. Let's see what we have here. So within the operations department report is some discussion both in some of my work that I delineated and some of the West Point work associated with the condition of the regulator dam. So there was a lot of concern that, as you can see, there was some rivulets in the dam to water interface where we were somewhat concerned that was the integrity of the dam being compromised by all this runoff and runoff. And so we had an expert come take a look, and no, it was not. But what's kind of compelling in this photograph is that this is a stream of clear water that's kind of moving through on the back end of the reservoir, farther to your left, so to speak, that's traveling towards this spillway. And all of this is turbid water from the clay that's run off this dam embankment. And as a result, this is the clarity of the raw water coming into the water treatment facility, which generally in a normal event would be about a 1. So this is 97. So the treatment facility had sustained treatment of high turbidity water, even currently. Today it was a 15 NTU, and a lot of that was associated with this runoff and run-on from the clay on the regulator dam. So staff went ahead and opened up the Bear Creek diversion, which as we went down to take a look, you can see that there were some tree stumps, and tree trunks that were over the edge of the dam. So you can see here's a concrete impoundment, and kind of as the crow flies, you would round the corner, and if you were to turn around right here, you would see this. So here's Bear Creek, here's the diversion that captures the water. We need to get down there when we can have access and remove these stumps off that dam. And then operations staff opened up this diversion, which you can see here's some telemetry associated with flow rates and whatnot, which flows by gravity into that regulating reservoir in an effort to clear it up and provide the water treatment facility with some water that's easier to treat.
Have we talked to you, or have I talked to you, Damon, about the need to get a name for that reservoir?
I think I've heard some names bandied about. Which one do you think?
Well, not regulator reservoir, okay? Can't call it regulator reservoir. No, it's Peter Martin reservoir.
That's him in the picture.
The Peter Martin impoundment.
There you go. Okay. Well, and regulator, we got to get rid of regulator. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just
no,
in your lifetime.
From here on out, it's the Peter Martin reservoir.
Okay, good.
Absolutely. Here's an interesting picture associated with stormwater runoff in Copperopolis. The picture to your left depicts a storm culvert that actually, naturally it was going to be flowing at a high velocity and with a large volume of water during the storm events. Well, what it did was it exposed a water main that was actually underneath that runoff. So that white section here is actually a water main. This is off of O'Byrne's Ferry and Copper Cove Drive near the landscaping outfit. And so we worked with staff and the local paving contractor who was out to pave some of our leak patches, and they worked together to cover the water main back up and provide adequate drainage for the culvert there. Let's see here. And then just to kind of give you an idea of the run-on and run-off that we experience at some of our facilities, this is the Vallecito wastewater facility during the rain event. And that's all, normally that looks like just good old-fashioned asphalt underneath all that water. But I put these pictures in there to bring to light that as we come out of the rain events, the construction department is going to have a lot of work associated with reestablishing roadways and working to reestablish drainage at a lot of our facilities. It's kind of it's a big deal, particularly at our Copper Cove wastewater treatment plant, where we have, give you guys an understanding of what we experience and what our neighbor experiences at Vallecito. And then, Director Cicada, you talked about the reallocation of that $300,000 to buy some equipment. So this is pictures of the equipment that we purchased with that money. Originally, we had intended to buy a hydro excavator. However, it was determined that the $300K was inadequately, it wasn't enough to fund that hydro excavator. So we had some regulatory requirements that we needed to pay for in terms of studies associated with discharges from 2017. And then we repurposed some of that money to buy this equipment, which allowed us to post equipment trickle down, for lack of a better word. Copper Cove distribution crew, that crew was able to make use of a skid steer and a mini excavator, which is a great help to them.
Are the operators of that equipment certified?
They are, yep. And so what we did is, as out of the gate, the quotes that we brought before the board to reallocate that money was from Bobcat. And once we received the concurrence to go ahead and reallocate that money, we went to Caterpillar and asked for some quotes, and they actually came in cheaper. So this equipment saved the district $12,000 off that original outlay.
Wasn't it Holt?
Good job.
Is Caterpillar the same as Holt?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you get your Caterpillar belt buckles?
I did not, man.
Okay.
They didn't make it to my office.
The mini excavator, does it have a thumb on that bucket?
It does.
Wonderful.
So actually, we were able to get a thumb and to get forks, which is a huge benefit for staff in Copper, because now it allows them to store material and equipment in places that before they could not. So,
Is there any possibility that somewhere on your wish list, there's a masticator floating around in your mind to put on the front of that skid steer?
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes. That's on the wish list. And then so the questions slide is just a depiction of the snow, as you well know, Bertha, up in your neck of the woods. This is Amos. I think
Masticator.
Probably. So this was when he was on one of his outings to locate a water meter.
Good luck.
In the snow.
Isn't there a drive-by meter at that location?
It was a busy February, but, you know, I can't say enough about our field staff. I think they all work really hard, they do a great job. Once again, another Adventure Field month is in the books.
That looks like Miko.
It could be.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you're right.
The slide there says questions. I suppose that's the question mark. But I don't have any questions, Damon, but I just want to really acknowledge the value of what you're doing here for us. It's kind of taking the board out in the field, what do they call that? Not literally, but conceptually or something. But there's a lot of value in that. Appreciate it very, very much.
Yeah.
And the field staff appreciate
That's-
that you guys can see what they do. I mean, it means a lot to them.
Because that's what I was thinking as I was looking at how many different shops were reporting, and they probably, are really enjoying letting us know
Yes.
how many pieces they take care of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Virtual.
I pare the department reports down a little bit.
They want to tell us.
Everybody, yes, they want you to know. And I appreciate that, and they do great work. I can't say enough good things about the staff.
Well, I hope that you are giving them the feedback that we're giving you, because it's, don't you think it's great, Cindy?
I love it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I've talked to all mine several times on board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Damon, good job.
Thank you.
Good job.
I will. Thank you.
I just echo there's been a lot of evenings, weekends, whenever it is that something's going on, that our crews don't hesitate. They're out there handling stuff. They've done a lot of hard work during these storms. So, and they've been put on notice that our at its past lift station number 2 is from here on out top priority in the system, since it's about 100 yards from my house and it's a little bit uphill from my house. So that wastewater lift station is on the top of everybody's list, but I appreciate all the work that they've done.
I thought we weren't publishing where you lived.
Too late.
When you came in here with that bluebell thing with the valve on, I thought it was some kind of musical instrument. Huh?
Well, that's.
It soon will be. It soon could be.
It could be. huh? Okay.
You wanna blow in there or something?
No, I bet I could. 4F. We are on item 4F. We have a discussion and action regarding the support of SB 669 Caballero, the Safe Drinking Water Trust. Joel, you have a report.
Good afternoon, Mr. President and members of the board. I have 2 items for you today on the legislative side. The first is SB 669, and I know that most of us are familiar with this, so we can move through this rather quickly, and then I can answer your questions. But I do want to let you know who Aqua is having sponsor this. So this is Senator Ana Caballero, and her district is on that map down by the Salinas Valley, and then all the way over to Fresno, and down to Coalinga, and up to Modesto. So that's the spot where she represents. And so she is very concerned about safe drinking water in parts of the Central Valley and the Salinas Valley. And in terms of the history, I'm not going to go over this unless there are questions, but as you know, we've been fighting this for the last 2 years, the water tax. This is Aqua's proactive approach to stop playing defense and start playing offense to solve this problem, but not make all the water agencies become tax collectors. We want to do this without a tax. So what is the proposal? SB 669. Instead of taxing water agencies, fertilizer producers, and dairies, and producing the funds in that way, we would instead use a budget surplus. And by the way, this year has a record surplus to the tune of $21 billion to take a one-time funding of anywhere between a $1 and $2 billion, depending on how many proceeds you need to fund this, and put that into a trust, and then invest that. And then the interest from the investments would be used to fund safe drinking water operations and projects as needed throughout the state. Just to note, there have been some analysis done of who actually doesn't have safe drinking water in the state, but the state is currently working on a official analysis, which is really what we want to see before we say, okay, this is how many people don't have safe drinking water. And so it may be good to see the results of that analysis before we say a number like, 500,000 or 1 million or 2 million people don't have safe drinking water. There have been some environmental justice groups who have come out with some numbers, but we have a little bit of concern about how they came to those numbers. So we want to get that real number from the study that's ongoing right now. In terms of the administration, this revenue would be overseen by a board of trustees, and then the state water board would actually distribute the money to those who needed it. And so I just wanted to tell you, well, why does this make sense? Well, it makes sense because we don't want to be tax collectors. Water agencies shouldn't have this on their bills. This would set a very dangerous precedent. Now is the time to use surplus general fund money to fund this. This is a perfect time. This is a statewide issue. So when we have this much extra money, let's make the investment now and create a trust. Additionally, it makes sense because why should water agencies, fertilizer companies, and dairies take care of safe drinking water for the entire state when water agencies certainly aren't responsible for that, and dairies and fertilizer companies are only partially responsible for unsafe drinking water. A lot of this is naturally occurring and for land use planning. So we like the idea of using general fund money because that spreads the burden to everyone in the state and actually has a link to income. The more taxes you pay, the more income you have, hypothetically, you might say. And as for the other side of this argument, Governor Newsom came out with his budget proposal, and a safe drinking water fund was one of his top priorities. He took his staff, his cabinet down to the South Central Valley within the first week of being sworn in and said, look, I want to show you what a community looks like without safe drinking water. And so in his budget proposal, he's calling for $190 million to fund this each year. That's even more than the proposal last year, which was 130 million. And the proposal last year called for about $1 a month per residential customer. Just to put it into perspective, the majority of our customers under that proposal would be paying $1 a month.
When he came out and talked about this right off the bat, at the beginning of his election cycle, he didn't say where the money was coming from, though. He didn't designate that it would be the same plan as last year.
Right.
And with that said, does he have an open mind? Has anyone approached him about the different way of funding this same program?
The people who I've talked to and been reading the budget proposal, the same track that was taken in the previous 2 years is the favored avenue. And in the legislative symposium that Michael and Cindy and Russ attended, there were some folks from the agricultural community, there were some folks from Aqua, there were folks from the Environmental Justice Group, and with the supermajority that Democrats have this year, and with Governor Newsom making this priority, it seemed as though the proponents of the water tax are very confident that this is going to go through, and there may not be much we can do about it, is that attitude. That's what I saw at that symposium. Now, we believe that we have a better solution, and we need to advocate for that, even if some of these folks think that they can just go ahead and push a tax through. But especially the representative from Ag, he basically said, you need to just get ready for this and prepare for it. This is pretty much inevitable at this point. So we need to be creative, we need to advocate, we need to help the coalition to try to push this different solution forward.
Do you want to touch on what the representative from Fresno, Andreas, can't remember his last name. Borges, yeah, he was really kind of taken aback by when we pointed out to him what it would take here to implement the collection process and do the evaluation and all that kind of stuff. He says, I didn't think about that. And we sort of settled in on the fact that it would take at least one full-time employee just to administer this collection process. That's a huge amount of money. What do we say, $150,000 a year for our agency alone? So anyway, that is my hope that even on the other side of the aisle, that they would recognize that that's an unintended consequence of this solving this problem. You're creating a much larger problem.
You're absolutely right. And in addition to potentially needing new staff, we also would have to do IT upgrades, we'd have to do software upgrades in order to even handle this new tax and making sure that it was in our system correctly. And then can you imagine having a water bill that had a new line item with, even if it was 95 cents state water tax, and the number of calls that would generate and the anger our customers would have that this is on their bill. And that wouldn't necessarily be directed at the state, that would be directed at staff and at this board. So there are a lot of concerns about becoming a taxing agency. The precedent is very concerning. This could be the first of many if this goes through.
Are you asking well, okay, we have submitted a letter, but, we know a lot of other groups or organizations who would be in a, great position to write letters of support for this. Is that what we're?
If the board goes with staff recommendation and supports this, Michael has already been provided with a draft letter, which we haven't sent out because we're waiting on the board to take a formal position. And at that point, we'll be able to send the letter. In addition, there's interest with Tuolumne County and Amador County to do a joint letter with all three of us signing on to it to have a little bit more authority and represent a region, not just a district. And then there's a coalition letter that Aqua has put out, which has hundreds of signatures on it, which we would also be able to sign the updated version this year.
But the previous letters you're referring to, the board sent last legislative session were in opposition to SB 623 and the budget trailer bill, which was to implement the budget tax, or the water tax. This one is in support of Aqua's alternative, the Drinking Water Trust, which would still create the drinking water fund, but from a different source. So what we're doing now is instead of just opposing the tax, we're supporting an alternative.
So this is a discussion and action item. We can take action on here with the idea that the board supports SB 669?
Right.
Right, with that position, we'll take it from there in those, the different activities that Joel mentioned, and then whatever else comes up, and, within the resources that we have, our ability to support this bill.
Well, I think that's a no-brainer. I'd like to make that motion at this point.
And I'll second.
Flip a coin. Bertha? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, would you please poll the board?
Director Underhill?
Yes.
Director Radovich?
Yes.
Director Cicada?
Yes.
President Thomas?
Yes. Okay, Joel, the next item is yours also.
Yes, thank you. So this is one of the more concerning bills that we've seen put forth in a long time in terms of direct impact on this county's future. This is SB 474 by Senator Stern. And for those who are at the legislative symposium, this is the gentleman who spoke to us during lunch, the young millennial senator from Malibu. And so he has come forth with this bill, and it really is a direct attack on area of origin water right reservations, which we are counting on heavily for this county's future, especially on Montgomery and Calaveras water systems. So he's located way down south in Malibu. He's a Harvard graduate, former environmental attorney and law lecturer, and very charismatic young man. Seemed to actually have a lot of good ideas that may be helpful to us, but this is certainly one that we take great issue with. And so I'm not going to go into all the detail, but I did want to make this available in case we have questions. But the area of origin water rights history goes way back to the 1920s. And really what happened is the state wanted to do large water projects, and so it passed legislation to start filing for unappropriated water throughout the entire state. And that was setting the groundwork for things like the State Water Project and Federal Water Project. And so what happened was when this legislation passed in 1997, counties of origin said, hey, wait a minute, if you're filing on all this water and these projects are built and it's all taken, what's going to happen to us? We're going to have small populations, we're not going to be able to use this water, but if it's gone, we won't be able to grow. And so over the years following that, in the 30s and again in the 50s, there were amendments and new legislation that really sought to protect counties of origin and our ability to use water and have that water reserved for us in a reasonable manner. So we can't take all the water and hoard it and have a right to that and not have to pursue it and just have it waiting for us. But there can be a reasonable amount of water that would allow us to grow when we're ready to grow. And one of the special protections that was included in law was that we didn't have to diligently pursue that water. So it's reserved for us, and we don't have to actively try to utilize that water or make petition to use that. We're kind of protected, and it's reserved for us. And that's a very special protection. Usually, you have to actively pursue the use of water in order to have access to that water. So why are we so concerned about SB 474? Because what it's suggesting is that these reservations of water rights for counties of origin would be extinguished by January 1st of 2021 unless we do start pursuing that water with due diligence. So we would be subjected after that date to what everyone else would be subjected to go after a water right. And what's concerning about that is we have not grown, we don't have storage for that water, we don't have a place of use for that water. We really don't have the ability to make an argument that yes, we're going to be using this water, and it's also be very expensive to start pursuing that water, millions of dollars, and so we're not in a position to do that. So what we need is to have the protections that are currently in place to remain, and this bill would take those away from us. So this is a huge threat, not just to CCWD, but to the entire future of Calaveras County and our ability to grow and prosper in the future. So staff is coming out with a strong recommendation, oppose, not even oppose unless amended. This is a straight oppose because this is such a threatening bill to the future of this district. And just pointing out to what would it impact, we have 1927 reservation water rights on the Montgomery River and 1952 on the Calaveras River. And so that's what we're looking to protect, the future of our county. On the Stanislaus River, that's been fully appropriated, so we do not have the area of origin rights don't apply over there. But on the north and central county, we certainly do. So are there questions on this bill?
And just to clarify, there is build-out potential, there are potential storage projects, there are ways for us to put that water to use, but the purpose of the area of origin protection is to give rural areas more time to go through that process, which is really important. And we've got about 19,000 acre feet on the McCollum that would be potentially at risk if this bill were to pass.
Okay, well, going back to the previous item, it's clear that Aqua is the entity that sought out Representative Caballero. Looking behind the curtain to Stern, who sought him out to present this? Do you know?
I'm not in a position to speculate on that right now. I think that we need to have more conversations and find out who actually maybe came up with this idea. So I wouldn't want to speculate at this time. Once we do know, we certainly can report that back.
Well, we do have indications it's coming from Water Board staff. Water Board staff is working with Senator Stern's office. So that
Holy cow.
is problematic, obviously, and there will be proposed amendments to the bill. There will be some source county agencies that are willing to consider those amendments. But from my perspective, and I've talked to attorneys for a few other agencies that see it the same way, I can't envision an amendment to this bill that would protect CCWD's interests. So it's one that was just introduced last week. So we don't have a draft letter yet. We don't have a full strategy yet. Aqua hasn't taken a position on this yet and won't this week. There's a state leg committee meeting on Friday, but this bill is not in the packet yet. But it will be an interesting discussion within Aqua, and it may be one of those bills that Aqua decides not to take a position on because there'll be member agencies on both sides.
Is there an argument that we wouldn't take a position at this early date? Or it seems obvious that that CCWD should be and will be, and I want to be opposed to SB 474, but is there any argument that you see in not moving early before?
It was my recommendation to make sure we got it into this bill packet, even though the bill just came out last week, because there are meetings that are starting to take place now, and I'd like to be able to, even if we're not participating in those meetings, I'd like the people who are to be able to say, yes, CCWD has chimed in on this as well. I know the county supervisors are concerned about it, so I think now's the time to start building momentum in opposition to this bill.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to move to oppose SB 474.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Take a lead on this one.
Anybody in the audience want to comment on this? I just have one, go ahead.
Just one quick question. Does anybody know if SB 474 is affecting any difference on the water rights? I know the CCWD's water rights not this are post 1914. Do you know if there's any effect on pre-1914s?
There wouldn't be, especially not on the Stanislaus side, but none of the CCWD doesn't have any pre-14s that would be subject to this one. No.
Okay, but I just have a question. We knew about this bill and what it was supposed to what it was targeting, but I don't remember anybody mentioning that it was Stern, and if that was known, why was everybody so friendly toward him? I mean,
I did not know about this one prior to last week's symposium.
His knees taken out that day.
In fact, I think it did come out that day. I did not know about this bill prior to my friendly exchange with him.
Yeah, he seemed to be so brilliant and right on.
Well, he to me, he was a pleasant surprise in the fact that he's a legislator that understands energy issues. And there aren't a lot of those out there. No disrespect to legislators who don't, it's just not their background. So I thought he was somebody we can, he still may be, somebody that we can work with on that front. But this one was a surprise after that.
Can we invite him up here? We need to talk to him.
I think that'd be a great idea.
Seriously, right?
I think that's a great idea, absolutely.
Okay.
I have a question on these counties that are listed here, because I see, a few that are back with us, Fresno, Kern County, Amador County. So I would like to ask if we're going to handpick these people who have the really old ones and form a coalition of some kind. You know, because Tuolumne County, well, no, they don't have any water rights, so.
Not yet.
Right. We'll certainly be working with those who our interests align with, and
Yeah.
it may be interesting to see how that plays out.
Once it sinks in to them, you know, because if you just heard it.
Right.
Okay, moving along, we have a motion and a second. Would you please poll the board on this?
Director Underhill?
Yes.
Director Riderman?
Yes.
Director Cicada?
Yes.
President Thomas?
Yes. Thank you very much, Joel.
Thank you, Joel.
Do you have Stern's telephone number?
His office, not his person.
Well, we should work on that. My goodness, we're down to 5, general manager report. No,
No,
no, no,
we
no,
have-
4-H, 4-H. well,
4-H.
Yeah, well, it's same as 4-H, go ahead.
Same person. And actually, I think this is my first agenda item where I'm the designated presenter. Where did I go to the podium?
No, you have a microphone.
I wouldn't want to accidentally get some exercise today, so I'll stay right here. This is an item, obviously near and dear to me, but I think in the interests of the district as well. The Utica Water and Power Authority Board adopted a resolution a couple weeks ago that was essentially an invitation to agencies, water and wastewater agencies in the Highway 4 corridor to participate in a dialogue, and initially it's a planning discussion to kind of map out a process and facilitate a dialogue about the best way to deliver water and wastewater services in the Highway 4 corridor. So really, all this is for now is just an update and presenting to you that resolution. And then hopefully the board's blessing for the staff to participate in that discussion. I think we've had, these discussions have been going on for a long time in fits and starts, and for various reasons have, the status quo has been maintained for a long time. But the fact that this is being initiated from the Highway 4 agencies and an invitation to CCWD to participate, I think is a significant development. So my recommendation would be that we be open to that discussion and offer assistance to the extent that it's wanted and to the extent that we can.
Okay, does everybody understand what's being discussed here?
Yeah, oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Anybody
And-
want to ask any questions about it?
Well, okay, so will be, staff support from CCWD is, of course, Peter?
It'd probably be me and Peter initially, and then we'll just to see how that first meeting plays out. I think the goal of the first meeting is basically to establish a process for how that'll play out going forward. And then so we can make some staffing decisions at that point.
Well, I think collaboration, cooperation between adjoining districts in the same area is important. I mean, I think it's huge, and it makes everything run a little bit better. And I think what we're talking about here is dialogue and discussion at this point. I think it's a no-brainer that if we don't do it, it's kind of silly. I mean, we're not even finding out what's going on or what what would be discussed. And I don't think anyone here at this today would ever be opposed to doing this. I certainly agree with it and would like to proceed forward with it. My only question is, I'd like to see how it happens, how it rolls out. Can more than two of us be, in your opinion, be at the? I know you're talking about staff, showing up. I'd like to show my support and show up at some point in these meetings. Would it be appropriate if more than a couple of us, 2 board members went?
To this initial meeting especially, it wouldn't be a Brown Act notice meeting. And so 2 maximum from each agency. I think the idea initially here is this being sort of a staff level, let's lay the groundwork and create a plan for how this is gonna play out. I don't think there'd be any opposition to 1 or 2 board members also being there to show support. But 3 board members would constitute a meeting.
I had this brilliant idea that we would draw straws.
I don't need to participate, I'll be gone.
Oh,
You know,
on March 29th?
I'm gonna be there, with my
As-
MSD hat on,
Right.
so
That's,
how does that affect?
you wear 2 hats.
Yeah, we could only have 1 other CCWD board member there then.
Regardless of the fact that she would be representing
Mhm.
MSD.
We can't ignore the fact that she's also a CCWD director.
Can't ignore me.
It's hard to do.
Sorry, guys.
What time is that meeting?
9 o'clock in the morning on Friday, 23rd.
5 o'clock in the morning?
9
Is that-
o'clock.
Oh.
Well, it's 20,
29th.
29th, I think.
Yeah.
9 to 11. And I'm assuming it's gonna be at UWBA.
Okay, well, let's not get over in the grass, but was that a motion that you made a moment ago?
I don't want to keep, yeah, it would be unless someone else wants to make it.
I'll make a motion that we attend this invitation and have Michael and Peter be the representative for that first meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the board? Joe?
If you were to call it a workshop meeting, would that get away from the Brown Act violation?
I think that's what this first meeting is intended to do, is to figure out, eventually, yes, let's bring the board members together, maybe the full boards together, it will lead to that. I think the idea here was that this initial meeting would be basically a planning meeting. Not so much a substance meeting, but let's map out that process and let's make sure when the time is right, we have an agendized meeting for boards to be present and public to be present.
You know, Michael, with me being there as MSD, I'm not certain that it's not okay for 2 other board members from CST to be there, as long as they're not talking together.
At an
What if they're
agendized
just-
public meeting, that would be okay. But
Okay,
this is not agendized public
Okay.
meeting. So if this was
Good.
you 3 of you could show up, all
See,
5
now,
of you
and
could show
I don't know,
up to.
I know
a
you're an
Utica board
attorney,
meeting.
and this is a legal matter involving the Brown Act. I'm going to argue with you for a moment, because
Sure.
I think the Brown Act is a lot more about,
Making
it's
decisions.
about behavior. Behavior at the meeting, and whether or not you can actually not interact with your board members at that meeting and have an open discussion. I think it's more about behavior. You could be in the same room, you're allowed to be on in the same car, as long as it depends on your discussion during that time. And I've just recently gone through a very similar situation with our board of supervisors in this county. All 5 of them meet for lunch and sit there with county council and a CAO. This behavior,
I don't disagree with you. I agree with you 100%.
Okay.
I find it hard to believe that there's any way that you could construe this meeting as not being board business or business that could come before
You
this
can,
board.
it might come before the board, but we're not discussing if Bertha and I and Cindy went to this meeting
Just listen.
and we just listened and we could talk out, but we didn't talk to each other.
So that is the exception in the Brown Act for noticed public meetings. So all 5 of you could show up to a Utica board meeting and sit and not talk outside of a public comment. And as long as you're not talking amongst each other, that's no problem. There's an exception within the Brown Act for that. This is not a noticed public meeting.
Okay, well, neither is sitting in lunch in a restaurant.
Not talking about board business.
Not talking about board business, okay.
It's perfectly
And
fine
this-
for them to do that.
This definitely will be on our agenda again. so
This is definitely gonna
Okay.
would be
All right.
considered board business.
Thank you. Thank you.
And there, you guys can have lunch together and talk all you want about your families and the weather and whatever else might come up.
Okay.
But when it comes to something that could affect the district, and it could potentially be board business, a quorum of the board can only discuss that at a
Okay.
noticed
No,
public meeting.
thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, no problem.
So that,
But one other clarification, I'm not your attorney. Matt couldn't be here today.
No, but I know, I just said you are a.
Yes.
well, but our general manager, I mean, to his credit, he has been a Brown Act trainer. So I think that
I've just been trained.
you've been trained. So thank you for that. Okay, if we have no further questions on this, we have a motion and a second. Could you please poll the board?
Director Underwood?
Yes.
Director Redimer?
Yes.
Director Siqueta?
Yes.
President Thomas?
Yes. Okay, are you ready for your general manager's report?
Yeah, I'm sure this is why Frank's really here, because he's tired of not hearing my reports. Come on. One last time? No? All right. Frank is the O&M supervisor at Utica. So he's heard many board reports from me.
Yeah.
Let's see, I've got just a handful of things. I've been doing a lot. In the time available, I've been doing some field visits with Damon, trying to get out and learn our infrastructure, which is, as you all know, spread far and wide. I've seen parts of the county that I had never seen before. So that has, and staff has been very gracious and taken time out of their days to entertain me and show me around. Sometimes give me an earful when it's appropriate. And we're gonna continue doing that. We're kind of working our way through the system in a way that makes sense as, where the high priority items are, but also areas where I'm less familiar, kind of, the Highway 4 area will probably be last. Working my way through the rest of the system and focusing on areas where we know that there's kind of pressing items. And then we've already discussed the Aqua Legislative Symposium, and thanks to Joel for setting up meetings with Assemblyman Bigelow and Senator Borges. After those meetings, I think they were productive, and those are important relationships that we need to maintain. This will be coming back at a later date with a lot more detail, but just want to let the board know we are working hard on the Section 219 authorization for water and wastewater funds, or environmental mitigation, but that can be used for wastewater, and that's an authorization that was made for this district in 2007, I think it was, that we are at risk of losing if we don't put it to use, and so we've prioritized that, and we're going to try to bring that home. Quick update on the property purchase. I want to make sure we keep everybody up to speed on that. Next time you see it, it might be mowed. We got permission from the property owner to do some vegetation clearing so that we can bring some consultants out to make sure our due diligence, to make sure that property is going to do everything that we want it to do before we commit significant resources to it. And we still have the option to pull back if not. We'll continue to give you updates on that as it moves forward. Couple of just outreach notes. The town hall meeting in Copper on the 19th we mentioned. We'll be down there discussing the wastewater lift station construction projects. And then we'll start an outreach plan for the Reach One project here shortly too.
We want to make sure those lift stations get corrected before they start doing the one by your house though too.
No, that one's the highest priority. So I think that's about all I have for now. Thank you.
Did you want to touch on that, the role reversal on the GSA?
Yeah, we had a productive meeting with the county. We've been very heavily involved, as you all know, in the Groundwater Sustainability Agency. And Peter's really become an important part of that process with his subject matter expertise. And Director Thomas has been serving on the JPA board as well. So CCWD has really taken an active leading role, I would say, in that process. But it's really coming down to the point where this is the year where we are going to have to adopt the groundwater sustainability plan. And the county has a big stake in that, probably more than CCWD does. And they've been less involved in that process than we have. So we had a really productive meeting with county staff and Supervisor Mills to make sure that they're going to be up to speed, so the supervisors will have the information they need when it comes time to adopt that plan. And they have since gone back and allocated or given us an agenda item. I told Peter I was trying to reduce his workload on this issue, and I ended up creating more work for him, as we'll be presenting to the county supervisors in their April 11th meeting, I think it is. But it's just an important, I think, we're not going to pull out of that process. That's not the intent here. It's just to make sure we're, scaling our work effort consistent with what our interest is, and that the county also is going to be in a position to adopt the plan when that time comes. And really, they're the ones that are going to be responsible for implementing it, more so than we are. So
Yeah.
we're working with them on that.
Because if I remember correctly, when this was first discussed, the counties were the ones that were to take the lead. Is that?
No, the county, we were
They were
participating.
designated,
They didn't actually step forward and take their role until 6 months after we were involved.
Yeah,
in it, so.
but in the initial write-up on it, wasn't it the
I think
county?
you're referencing if the individual agencies don't participate in the process and approve the plan, then
maybe
the
that
county,
was
the
what it
home, the
was.
home county
Oh,
would be
okay.
responsible
Okay.
for that.
Okay, at the meeting this morning, I just want to report that I did make them aware that these role reversals were being considered, and that I probably wouldn't be coming back as the representative. Somebody else would be sitting there.
That's the
So-
other piece I forgot to mention, is Director Thomas would be stepping back from his role on the JPA board, and Supervisor Mills would be stepping in. So that's another part of that transition, I think.
Okay,
Who decided that?
who decided that? Well, if it's just logical. If we're not going to be the agency that's going to go out and enforce the groundwater extraction, the well, the ag wells pumping and stuff, we can't. We're not authorized to do that. The county has to do that. So, I mean, as much as I enjoy going down there and
Oh, yeah.
participating into it.
And they'll miss you, Russ.
I don't know about that. I said goodbye today, and nobody shed a tear at all.
You'll be able to.
It was just, it was part of the process of us sort of stepping back a little bit, and the county stepping in to take a more active role to make sure their supervisors are really up to speed. And Peter's done a great job of keeping you updated with regular presentations on how that process is playing out. It is gonna be a complicated document. When that groundwater sustainability plan comes out, it's gonna be a very technical, very, long, comprehensive plan. And so the supervisors really need to have the sort of updates that you're getting, so that when the time comes to approve it, they're ready to make that decision, because there's a narrow time window to approve the plan, and it could jeopardize the entire basin's compliance if the county doesn't.
Is Peter Martin's involvement being reduced at the same time, or is he?
Gradually,
Initially.
I think he's gonna be, like I said, he's an important part of that plan development process, which is still underway. So I think we're looking at ways where we can refocus some of his time. But I think it's gonna be a gradual process, especially the big change will be when the plan is actually adopted and it goes into the implementation phase. We have a much smaller role at that point, I think.
Sorry.
Hang in there.
Maybe I've been sitting too long.
You get that defibrillator?
There was a long discussion on a telephone conference call last week about the water budget and talking about Peter's role. Is my conclusion that the assumptions that the experts, geologists and water experts have analyzed our east side GSA's how our area is going to participate and be affected by this, that they have underestimated the water contribution that we make, both subsurface and on the surface. They've completely overlooked a number of the major creeks that flow, like the Tuolumne River on storm events and stuff, and they've overestimated the amount of pumping that goes on in our GSA area. So there's nobody in the whole region that can articulate those facts better than Peter. So he's got to stay in to make sure that we don't get, or the GSA collectively, that we even the district to a certain extent could be adversely affected if the wrong, what do they say, garbage in, garbage out, if it doesn't get properly analyzed. So I mean, this is the right time to make this transition, but we're not going to be able to step away completely for some time.
Right.
Okay, does that conclude our report? So,
I thought he was talking.
well, he was talking, but I was helping him. Okay, how about other board reports and proposed agenda items? Bertha, can we start with you?
Okay, well, the only thing that I did, of course, I had a picture that I was gonna send to everyone about the snow I had to walk through today to get to my car. It was ice, so we had our cleats and, sticks and everything just to help us get down to the driveway. But it's almost over. The only thing I was able to do, since it didn't snow last Wednesday, was to go to the EPOC meeting, and I filled in for Joel, who does such an excellent job. They all missed him. But I brought them up to date on what's happening. And one of the things that I proposed, and I had talked to Damon, is that in a couple of months, I know Damon is very busy. I'd like to bring him to EPOC and to make a presentation or something, explaining pipes and everything. The fellows are really very interested in what we do and how they're impacted and everything, so. And Ebbets Pass Property Owner Council, and it is comprised of about 13 subdivisions up in the Arnold area, down to Forest Meadows.
You should take time to go to one of those meetings if you can.
Yeah, if you.
Maybe you could email me the info on where it is.
Certainly. I know Russ has gone, and maybe one of these days, Scott will just see how we do things up the hill.
It's all of the
You can get some more mileage
HOAs
on
an invite.
in the Ebbets Pass area.
Just
All of the HOAs up
Invoice
there are
30 miles.
represented, and then there's usually
$10.
supervisor and Director Underhill, others. Ebbets Pass Property Owners Coalition, I think, or is it
Council.
council? Council.
Send me an invite. now.
Okay, I will, okay. Oh, and then last Saturday, I guess, did everybody hear it was my birthday? I have a couple of birthday cards still to open, but anyway.
Happy birthday, Bertha.
Happy belated birthday.
3/4 of a century plus one. That's it.
And I acknowledge your birthday on your birthday. And got you a card today.
I
so. Happy birthday.
Now get on with it. Okay.
Scott?
Me already?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm on the Mountain Counties Board, and we've created an ad hoc committee to look into, Mountain Counties Water Resource Association is currently a 501c6. is a fits federal designation, which means they can be politically involved and lobby for political positions. We're got the idea of creating a secondary, not necessarily a new board, but a secondary designation, which is allowed under the federal or the IRS designation to become a 501c3. So we'd be a nonprofit and be able to get grants. So that's what we're looking into. Looking into Prop 68 money for Parks, Water, and Environment is what it's designated. It's $4.1 billion. A lot of money for this area. So look, it'd be a great opportunity for all Mountain County areas, and certainly including CCWD, for looking into grants. And so that's had a meeting last week or earlier this week, and got another meeting next week looking into this and how we're going to do it. It's also going to be a cost share. On a side note, is the other thing that Mountain Counties is moving into is a cost share program for attorney services for smaller districts who don't have full access to a good water legal beagle. So those are just some interesting things going on with Mountain Counties. And that's all I really have for today.
Cindy?
I just want to say at the Aqua Symposium that we went through, I really enjoyed that. I thought it was really informative, and I wouldn't mind attending more of the Aqua meetings in the future. And,
Do we have a budget for it? We do, yes we do. Yes we do.
Well, half the time I don't even know if we get paid or not, so it doesn't really matter. I don't think I don't get paid, so. Anyhow, so I just really enjoyed it, and I'd like to, attend more of the meetings, and I'll talk with you offline. And I'm glad the snow is going away for Bertha and myself. That's it.
Good. All right, we only have another half hour, so let's see if I can fill it. Birthday, I can't let you steal all the thunder on the birthdays. I have, on the March 19th is my birthday, and I have the legislative committee meeting at 2 o'clock and a Black Creek Town Hall meeting at 5:30. And I can't bill for both of those meetings that day, so that's on my birthday.
There's not even a birthday exception for that?
I think it's written in the policy.
It might be, look into that.
Okay.
Get that policy binder at home.
Yeah, I do, right underneath my pillow. Son of a gun, let's see. Also, we only have one more meeting before we fly off to Washington DC, so be thinking about the items that we want to talk to our legislators back there about. We'll be talking briefly about that on the meeting on the 27th. What else?
Our next finance meeting is the 19th.
Oh, I can't attend that.
That's for Bertha and I, 19th at 9 a.m., right?
Yeah.
Bertha?
Right.
You'll be thinking of Russ
Yeah.
while you're there, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll bring cake. All right, that concludes my report. I want to talk about future agenda items a little bit. Okay. Is it? No, I'll make it quick. But Michael, we talked about this the other day about the diffugalty. That's an official engineering term, by the way. Diffugalty on the Copper Town Square retainage pool, underground swimming pool.
The collection line to nowhere?
Yeah. I don't know whether that should come first to the engineering committee, probably, but the board needs to be brought up to speed on.
Yeah, and
on that too.
I've followed up with staff already on that, so I think engineering committee would probably be the first step, but we'll bring an update to you.
Okay. So if, I don't recall a single time that a board member has said at this particular time on the agenda that I want to see something on the agenda next time, or 30 days from now, or 60 days.
You want to be the first?
Well, I am the first, yeah. But.
We don't always, you know, say it
But-
to the rest of the board. We say it to Michael or to say it to engineering or
But it's,
finance.
but this is a place that it's supposed to be.
Oh,
I
okay.
will say that, I had a ratepayer in my district call me about wanting to, disconnect his water. The building is abandoned and been destroyed and mowed down. And, when I spoke with, Joel this morning about it, he said you can't do that. So we are gonna be talking about it in the finance committee meeting first, and then bring it to a board to talk about,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah, and this is, you know, that is a very,
It's
you
just
know,
not.
it's a
in my
real
opinion,
issue. It's a real
big
issue.
Somebody has, well, anyhow, so that's what I'll be asking coming to the board. But they suggested we start at the finance committee meeting first and work out some particulars and then come to the full board with some possible solution.
Yeah, that would be a change in a board policy.
Yeah.
That we've had some discussions about in other instances, and so we're happy to entertain a potential amendment to the policy.
Well, there's a recent precedence on, maybe not precedence isn't the right word, but there was a small postage stamp piece of property in Murphy's someplace that we allowed them to discontinue the billing for.
That was the one
We're
down in
kind of off
Valley
topic
Springs.
here.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's why I say.
That
we'll,
was-
It will be on our
We're into
meeting
the
next
weeds.
week, and then come to the full board. So, yes, we are getting things on the agenda.
Yes, okay.
You've opened the
sorry.
floodgates here.
Well, that's what I'm here for.
Yep.
We are talking about water and floods, aren't we? All right, our next board meeting will be, and that March 27th date that I mentioned, and we'll be coming back at 1 o'clock on that day. So this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Good job, Mr.
Well,
Thomas.
thank you.
No, I can just give you.
Okay. So long straws.